Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and welcome to the World Alliance of Qara'im weekly Torah study. I'm Yaakov ben Yisrael, and I don't know who will be joining me today. Hopefully it'll be a great show, but today we'll be reading through Parashath Bo. That will begin in Exodus chapter 10, starting at verse 1. And we'll be reading through to chapter 13, verse 16, hopefully. And as always, I will wait a few minutes, normally 5 minutes, before I begin to read, so that everyone can join the program or tune in if they want. So I'll just post a link in the comment section so that everyone can find it if they want to join. And there's a bit of a delay between the comments on Facebook and YouTube and what I see here in my comment stream. So just keep that in mind. Okay.
Shabbat Shalom. Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I hear you fine.
Okay, perfect.
I hear a bit of an echo. Shabbat Shalom, Nicola. Thank you for tuning in and watching. I hope everyone can hear me fine. I don't know if there's a problem with the sound. If I sound like I'm in a fishbowl, just write that in the comments. If I sound okay, then you can write that too. Say everything sounds good, or you can just type 1 for good or 2 for bad, and then I'll know that I have a problem with the sound. Okay, so everything seems to be okay. I'll go ahead and begin to read. Masal Khair, Abdul Ghani. You must be further east than me. So, beginning at chapter 10, and we get started at verse 1. This is Parashath Bo. ויאמר אדוני אל משה, בוא אל פרעה. כי אני הכבדתי את ליבו ואת לב עבדיו, למען שתעופופי אלה בקרבו. And so Adonai says to Moses, go to Pharaoh, for I will harden his heart and the heart of his servants. Lima'an, again, this is the reason is means in order that, or so that, or with the purpose or intention of setting my miracle, these miracles of mine in his midst. Verse 2. ולמען תספר באוזני בנך ובן בנך את אשר התעללתי במצרים ואת עופופי אשר שמתי בה וידעתם כי אני אדוני. And also for the purpose or for the point that you will relate in the ears of your sons and your grandsons, the son of your sons, literally, the thing that I have brought against Egypt, and also my miracles that I set amongst them. And then you shall know that I am Adonai. Verse 3. ויבוא משה ואהרון אל פרעה ויאמרו אליו כה אמר אדוני אלוהי העברים עד מתי מאנת לענוב מפני שלח עמי ויעבדוני. And so Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and they spoke to him. Thus said Adonai, the God of the Hebrews, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Send my people that they may serve me. Verse 4. And if you have any questions while I'm reading, just post them in the comment section, and I'll keep looking here, and I'll answer them as soon as I see them. Verse 4. Ki imma ein ata lishalleach et ami hinani mevi mahar arbe bigavalecha. For if you are refusing to send my people, behold, tomorrow I will bring locust against your borders, which means all the land of Egypt. Verse 5. וכיסה את עין הארץ ולא יוכל לראות את הארץ ואכל את יתר הפליטה הנשארת לכם מן הברא ואכל את כל העץ הצומח לכם מן השדה. And it will cover the Ain Ha'aretz, which literally means the fountain of the earth, or the spring of the earth. But it's talking about you won't be able to see the earth at all because it'll be covered. And and the earth will not be able to be seen, and it will eat that which remains for you, that the Barad, which is the hail, left. And it will eat every tree which is growing for you in the field. So now, just to put this in context from last Shabbat, we had this hail that came across the land of Egypt, and it destroyed the crops and the animals that were left in the field. And so Pharaoh had to send to Goshen, which is separated from this plague. And he found out that in Goshen, the Israelites, they had food. They had no problem with their livestock. They were there. And since the livestock of Pharaoh died, of course, he would have had to have asked food from the Israelites, which would have really been a slap in the face at this point. And now here we have this locust now that's coming, and whatever was left over, whatever might have survived as far as the crops from the hail, now the locusts are coming and they're going to eat that up. Verse 6. ומלאו בתיך ובתי כל עבדיך ובתי כל מצרים אשר לא ראו אבותיך ואבות אבותיך מיום היותם על האדמה עד היום הזה ויפן ויצא מעם פרעה. And they shall fill your house and the houses of your servants and the houses of all Israel, which your fathers nor your grandfathers have seen from the day that they were even upon the earth until today. And so he went and he left from the presence of Pharaoh. And we know that this is in the singular. This is interesting. You see this a lot in the text, where we have the singular used, even though we know it's plural. Here we have, and he turned and he left. But it was both Aaron and Moses who were there. So it would be actually correct to say that they turned and they left. Verse 7. ויאמרו עבדי פרעה אליו עד מתי יהזה לנו למוקש שלח את האנשים ויעבדו את אדוני אלוהיהם הטרם תדע כי עבדה מצרים. And so Pharaoh's servants said to him, how long will this be a snare for us, or a trap? Mokesh is a trap or a snare or a net. Send the people that they may serve Adonai their God. Do you not yet know, or do you not yet understand, or have you not yet understood that Egypt is going to perish? And it's interesting, this verb Abadah, of course, is in the feminine because it's talking about Egypt. The story of Pesach, which is what we're coming to, actually began with the selling of Joseph to the Egyptians. The end of the Pesach narrative isn't actually the Exodus. It actually ends when you take your first fruits after they've already gone into the land and everything's been set up, and they actually bring the first fruits of the land to the place where God chooses. And it tells you that you will answer in that day when you leave your first fruits before the Kohen, and you'll say, My father was a perishing Aramean, and the reason why he was a perishing Aramean was because of the famine. And this is the whole point. Not only did God save the Israelites because Joseph was sent to Egypt, but the end of the Pesach story has to do with the successful return of the Israelites to the land and actually being able to take the first fruits of their land and bring it to the Kohen Gadol. So it's interesting they use the same word here, ki avada mitzrayim, because now Egypt's going to perish, right? Verse 8, ויושב את משה ואת אהרון אל פרעה, ויאמר עליהם, לכו עבדו את אדוני אלוהיכם. מי ומי ההולכים. And so Moses and Aaron were returned to Pharaoh, and he says to them, go and serve Adonai your God, and whoever, along with whoever is going with you. Me wa me holechim. And who is going. Verse 9. ويومر موشى بنعرينو وبزقنينو نلך ببنينو ببنותינו בצאננו ובבקרינו נלך כי חג אדוני לנו. And so Moses says to Pharaoh, obviously, with our young men and with our elders we will go. Also with our sons and our daughters, with our flocks and with our herds we will go, because we have a Hag, which is a pilgrimage festival for Adonai. Shabbat Shalom, fantastic lives world. That's a cool nickname. Verse 10. ויאמר אליהם, יהי כן אדוני עמכם, כאשר אשלח אתכם ואת טפכם, ראו כי רעה נגד פניכם. So verse 10 it says, and so he says to them, this is Pharaoh speaking to Moses now, let it be so, Adonai is with you, as I send you away, and also your children, your tapachim, then it would look bad, negative penation, which means in your presence, which basically is him saying that if I do this, then basically I'm giving up all my authority over you, and it would look bad not only to his servants, the Hebrews especially, but also to the rest of Egypt. Verse 11. Lo chen, it shall not be so. Lechu now, hagvarim ve'ibadu et Adonai, ki otha atem mevakashim ve'yagarish otham ve'et panei Pharaoh. And so he says, it shall not be so. Go, lechu now hagvarim. Let the Givarim, which is literally the men or the warriors or men of war, which is how it's often used when we talk about the warriors of David. They're called the Givarei David. So these are the men who are actually strong and fit for war, and let them worship Adonai, because that's what you're asking for. And so he sent them. So so they were driven out from the presence of Pharaoh. And that is the end of the first Aliyah. Now we'll begin the second Aliyah, in verse 12. ويومر أدونai el Moshe نتي يدך على أرض مصرين بأربع ويعل على أرض مصرين ويأكل את كل عصب הארץ את كل אשר השאיר הברא. And so Adonai says to Moses, stretch out your hand over or against the land of Egypt, in the matter of the locust, the arbe, which means with the locust, that they come upon the land of Egypt, and that they shall eat all of the grass of the land, everything that the hail left, whatever was left of the hail. Verse 13, وَيَتْ مُوشَى et مَتَيْهُ al eretz Mitzrayim, وَأَدْنَي نَحَاجُ رُوح قَدِيم بَآرَتْ كل هاليوم هو وكل هالليلة هالباقر حياة وروح قديم نسأت هالأربعين. And so Moses stretched out his matehu, which is his staff, over the land of Egypt. And as for Adonai, he drove an eastward wind against the land, which means it came from the east. And this is interesting too, that it comes from the east. The reason why this is interesting is because there's other places where it suggests this might have been from the south. The word kedem literally means before, the direction that you would be facing if you were looking at the cardinal directions on a map. And that's different for different places. And this is why you read sometimes that this could be the south, because what's considered Upper Egypt is actually, if you look on a normal map, you would think that would be Lower Egypt, because that's actually to the south from the direction of north on our normal map. However, for the ancient Egyptians, the origin, or where the Nile actually originated, which is to the south of Egypt, that would be there north on a map. And so that's why sometimes you see this translated as south, not necessarily here, but in other places. But it just means from whatever direction would be the forward-facing cardinal point on the map. But here we know this is an east wind, and it's interesting because the first vision of Pharaoh was of a wind, a scorching wind that came from the same direction. And that's what brought the famine that ultimately brought the Israelites to Egypt. And so now you have the locusts coming from the same direction. So as for Adonai, he drove an eastern wind against the land all that day and all the night. And in the morning, the east wind had brought the locust. Verse 14. ويعل هالأربع على كل أرض مصرين وينح بكل جبل مصرين כבד מאוד לפניו לא היה כן הרבה כמוהו ואחריו לא יחיה כן. And so the the locusts rose up and over all of the land of Egypt, and they rested in all of the border, the entire area of Egypt. It was very great. Before it, there were no locusts like it, and afterwards there shall not be the like. Verse 15. ويخس את عين كل הארץ وتحشاك הארץ ويאכל את כל עשב הארץ ואת כל פרי העץ אשר הותיר הברד ולא נותר כל ירק בעץ ובעשב השדה בכל ארץ מצרים. And so it covered the very face of the earth. Literally, this Ain Kul Ha'aretz, which means the source or the spring of the earth, literally. And the land was darkened, and it ate all the grass or all the herbs, the grass, or the vegetation of the land, and all the fruit of the trees, which survived, which remained after the hail. And nothing green remained on the trees or of the grass of the field. And that's in the entire land of Egypt. Verse 16. ويمحي פרעה לקרוא למשה ולאהרון ויאמר הטעתי לאדוני אלוהיכם ולכם. And so Pharaoh quickly called for Moses and for Aaron, and he says, I have sinned against Adonai, your God, as well as against you. Not only against Adonai, but also the two messengers here. Verse 17. وعتا سانا حتاثي أكحباهم وهئتروا أدوني لوحيخم ويسر معلاي راح كتحمادت هذا. And now, forgive just this one sin of mine. My one sin. This is what he basically said before. He said, intercede to Adonai, your God, that he take away from me only this death. And so he realized that the locusts were basically death to the land because they won't have anything at all to eat. The only ones who actually would be the Israelites. They have fruit on the trees, they have produce in the field, and they have cattle that weren't destroyed from the plagues. And they're about to take them with them, which is what they're telling Pharaoh. We're not going to leave empty-handed. We're going to leave also with our flocks and our herds and everything. Verse 18. ويأتي من فارعون ويعتار إلى أدونai. And so they left from the presence of Pharaoh and interceded to Adonai. Verse 19. ويهفوخ أدونai رוח يم حزق מאוד ويسع את הערבה ويتقعه يم סוף לא נשאר ערבה אחד. بكل جبال مصراعيم. And so Adonai changed he overturned with a very strong westerly wind. Now this is Yamma, which is the sea, which is talking about the Mediterranean Sea. And so it's a great western wind now, and it carried the locust and thrust them into the Yam Suf, which is what they're about to cross through on dry ground, so that not one locust remained in all the border of Egypt. Verse 20. ويحزق أدوناي את לב פרעה ולא שלח את בני ישראל. And again Adonai hardened the heart of Pharaoh so that he would not send the children of Israel. Verse 21. ويومر أدوناي إلى موسى نتي يدك على الشمايم ويحي خاشق على أرض مصرين ويميش خاشق. And so Adonai spoke to, or says to Moses, stretch out your hand towards the heavens, or against the heavens, and let there be a darkness upon the land of Egypt. And it says, وَيَمَيْش خَوْشِخ. Okay, and this means basically a darkness that's so thick that you can actually touch it. 22. ويت موشى את ידו על השמיים ויהי חושך אפלה בכל ארץ מצרים 3 ימים. And so Moses stretched out his hand toward the heaven, and there was a darkness that fell in all of the land of Egypt for 3 days. I'm just checking my comment section, make sure there's no questions. 23. לא ראו איש את אחיו ולא קמו איש מתחתיו 3 ימים ולכל בני ישראל היה אור במושבותם. And not one person saw his brother or his neighbor, and none stood from his place for 3 days. And however, for all the children of Israel there was light in their homes. And that is the end of the second aliyah. Now we begin the third aliyah with verse 24. ويقرأ فرعون إلى موسى ويؤمر לכו עבדו את אדוני רחסונכם ובקרכם יוסח גם טפכם ילך עמכם. So Pharaoh called out to Moses, or he called for Moses, and he said, go and serve or worship Adonai. Only your flocks and your herds shall remain. Also, your children shall go with you. So now he's trying to make a compromise. Say, okay, take your children, but leave your flocks and herds. Which makes a lot of sense, seeing there is no food. And if the Israelites leave with their flocks and herds, then basically that's a death sentence for the Egyptians, because they'll starve. They have nothing. Verse 25. ויאמר משה גם גם אתה תיתן בידינו זבחים ועולות, ועשינו לאדוני אלוהינו. And Moses said, you will also give to us, or in our hands, sacrifices and burnt offerings, which we shall prepare for Adonai our God. Verse 26, וגם מקננו ילך עמנו, לא תישאר פרסה, כי ממנו ניקח לעבוד את אדוני אלוהינו, ואנחנו לא נדע מה נעבוד את אדוני עד בואנו שם. And so this is Moses continuing his argument to Pharaoh. He says that also all of our livestock, mechanenu, which basically means all of our possessions, shall go with us. Not one split hoof will remain. Not one split hoof will remain from us. It shall be taken, meaning we're going to take everything to serve Adonai our God, because we do not know. Because we do not know how shall we serve Adonai until we come there. So this is interesting that the Torah, which was given at Mount Sinai, was basically unknown. Not everything. You have some similarities that we see from before the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai that remain in the Torah that was given. However, there's lots of things that we see that was given out at Mount Sinai they didn't even know. And this is proof of that he says we don't know how we're going to serve Adonai until we get there, so we need all of these things. Everything that we have, we're going to take with us. Verse 27, وَيَحَزَّيْكَ أَدْوَنَاءِ إِتْلَيْ بَرْعُهُ وَلَوْ عَذَا لِشَلَّحَمْ. And so Adonai hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he was not willing to send them away. Verse 28, but now, if you understand why he wasn't willing, like I said, they have no food. And if the Israelites leave with everything that they have, they would definitely starve. Verse 28. وَيُمَرْ لَهُ فَرْعُونَ لَيْخْ مِعَلَيْ هِشَّمِرْ لَخَا يَلْتَوْسَفْ رَأُوتْ پَنَاي كِي بِيُوم رَأُوتَخَا پَنَاي تَمُوتْ. And so Pharaoh said to him, go from me, get away from me, but be careful. Take very care that you continue to see my face, because in the day that you see my face, you will die. Interesting. 29. ויאמר משה, כן דיברת לא אוסיף עוד ראות פניך. And so Moses said, it shall be as you have spoken. I will no longer see your face. So basically Pharaoh sealed his own fate there. Now we're in chapter 11, verse 1. ויאמר אדוני למשה, עוד נגע אחד אביא על פרעה ועל מצרים. אחרי כן ישלח אתכם מזה, כשלחו כלה גרש לגרש אתכם מזה. And so Adonai spoke to Moses, only one more plague, nega, I will bring against Pharaoh and against Egypt. And after that, he shall certainly send you away from here. And it says, Kashallecho chala. And this is kind of difficult to translate here, but it says, and at his as he sends away, at his sending away, Khalab, which basically means he'll be destroyed, or it could mean that he will send you away completely. It'll be finished. Then we have Garesh, and he will completely, or he will definitely drive you away. Shabbat Shalom. So, verse 2. دبرنا بأذني حرام ويشهد إيش بقت رعيه وإيشا بقت رعوثا كلي خاسف وخلي زهاب. Speak now in the ears of the people, that they ask each person from his neighbor, and each man from his neighbor, and each woman from her neighbor, articles of silver and articles of gold. Okay, so is the sound bad? Bad sound. Okay, then we'll give it just a minute. Hopefully, it comes back. Okay, is the sound better now? Hopefully that fixed the sound. Now it's okay. Okay. So I'll reread that verse 2. دبرنا بأذنيها عام ويشأل إيش مئات رعيه وإيشا مئات رعوثا كلي كاسف وخلي زهاب. Speak now in the ears of the people, that each man asks from his neighbor, and each woman from her neighbor, articles of silver and articles of gold. Which is what God told Moses at the very beginning. At the end, whenever he finally sends you away, you're not going to leave out empty-handed. But they will leave out with not only the food of Egypt and what remains of the livestock, but also with the wealth. So they didn't leave out poor slaves. They left out very rich. And they were so rich when they left Egypt that, remember, after 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, they came to the borders of Edom, and they told the king of Edom, look, allow us to pass by, and we will pay for every drop of water and every morsel of food that we're going to eat. This is not poor people. You always see it represented. These are some really poor, destitute people that were just 400 years after slavery. They just didn't have anything. And you see them come out with all these rickety wagons. This is how it's always portrayed in different films. But that's not true. They came out with all the wealth of Egypt. They were very rich. And you have to think about it. They were so rich that they were able to pay these different kings for every drop of water that not only they drank, but also their cattle, their livestock had to drink water as well. Verse 3. ويتين أدوناي اتخين حقام بعيني مصرعين قام هايش موشي גדול מאוד בארץ מצרים בעיני עבדי פרעה ובעיני העם. And so God gave or set grace, the people's grace, before the eyes of the Egyptians. Also, the man Moses. Now, I like the way they worded this, or it was worded. Ha'ish Moshe, the man. He's not a god after all this. He's still the man. And the man Moses, became very great in the land of Egypt, in the eyes of the servants of Pharaoh, as well in the eyes of the people, the Israelites. That's one of the concerns that Moses had when he first encountered God on Mount Sinai at the bush, is that I'm gonna go and they probably won't believe me, right? And so all this happened just as Moses said, and at the end, he became very great in the eyes not only of Pharaoh and his servants, but also in the eyes of the people. They no longer doubted him at this point. And that is the end of the third aliyah. Now we'll begin the fourth aliyah, which is in verse 4. For everyone who's joining us now, we're in Exodus chapter 11, and we're beginning now on the fourth aliyah, which is chapter 11, verse 4. وَيَوْمِرْ مُوشَى كَوْ أَمَرْ أَدُونَي فَحَدْثُوتْ حَلَيْلَا أَنِي يُدْسَيْ بِثُخْ مِصْرَيْمْ. And so Moses said, thus has Adonai spoken. Thus has Adonai said. At about midnight, at about half of the night, is basically what he says. I'm going out in the midst of Egypt. Okay. Verse 5. ומית כול בכור בארץ מצרים מבכור פרעה היושב על כסאו עד בכור השפחה אשר אחר הרחיים וכל בכור בהמה. And all the firstborn of the land of Egypt will die, or is dying. From the firstborn of Pharaoh, the one sitting upon his throne, okay, even to the firstborn of the servant girl, which is behind the mill, and even the firstborn of the beast, which is kind of a strange thing because we saw earlier that the destiny was one actually feeding on and put his livestock in the shelter. They survived. So the first, even from both. Verse 6. وهيثان سأعطى גדולה בכל ארץ מצרים אשר כמוהו לא נחייתה וכמוהו לא תוסיף. And it shall be such a great cry in the land of Egypt that it's like would never have been, and it's like will never again be. It will never happen again. Verse 7. ולכל בני ישראל לא יחרץ כלב לשונו למי איש בעד בהמה למען תדעון אשר יפלה אדוני בין מצרים ובין ישראל. And as for all the sons of the children of Israel, lo yiharatz kelev l'shano, which means they literally no dog will sharpen his tongue, but it's talking about not even a dog will bark from man nor from beast. So this is interesting. He called basically the Egyptians dogs. And we know that he meant this specifically towards the Egyptians because it says so. Lo yiharatz kelev l'shano l'meish v'ad behema, of a man, even of a beast, so that you shall know that which Adonai, this miracle. This is Yafle, which we saw earlier. The Philith. This is talking about this miracle of separation between the Egyptians and the Israelites, so that you will know that God makes a miracle between Egypt and between Israel. Verse 8. Yeah, I apologize for the sound. That's one of the bad things about all this technology. So, Shabbat Shalom, Shaya. Verse 8. وَيَرْدُ كُلُّ عَبْدَيْخَ إِلَيْ وَهِشْتَهَوُوا لِي لَمُورٍ Say, Ata, وَقُلْ ha'am asher بِرَغْلَيْخَ وَأَخَرِيخَيْن أَيْتْسَي وَيَيْتْسَي مِعِمْ پَرْعُو بَخَارِي عَف. What's up with the eyes, man? Shabbat Shalom.
Like to make a big entrance.
Uh-huh. So we just read verse 8.
Like to
Chapter 11, verse 8.
Funny faces.
Uh-huh. I tried to put a background in here, but it's not working. Do you see a background behind me?
Yeah, I see a giant cat in a chandelier.
No, that's not it. You see, that's not it. So that's what's supposed to.
I don't see any. I don't see any background.
Oh well, I don't know what the deal is.
Uh-huh.
I'm still trying to figure all this out.
Uh-huh. 1 second. I'll just put my headphones on here. There we go. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. So we're
much
in the Quran. Where are we in the Quran?
We are in Exodus chapter 11.
Okay.
And we just read verse 7.
So 11:7. It's like 7-Eleven except backwards.
Yeah.
7. Oh, I almost went to 7-Eleven. Okay, 11. And we just read 7. Okay. Uh-huh.
So
Okay.
this is I just made a comment about this, about what actually is being said. It says Ulechul b'nei Yisrael lo yiharatz keleb lishanon. And so no dog will basically sharpen his tongue or wag his tongue against the Israelites, whether it's a man or a beast. Okay, so it's interesting that God refers to the Egyptians as dogs.
No, I don't think he's referring to the Egyptians as dogs at all.
So you mean there's actually he's talking about dogs then?
Talking about he's talking about not even so much as an animal, not even so much as a dog is going to attack an Israelite.
No,
so either that or it's just a figurative expression, but I don't think it's referring. I always took it as literal, meaning that even the wild beasts, even the dogs, are not going to so much as sharpen. Haratz is actually sharpen, like harutz.
Yeah.
And but however you want to say, they usually translate it's wet, W-H-E-T, wet their tongue against the Israel. In other words, nothing, not even so much as a dog, is going to bother Israel.
Yeah.
That's the way. In modern English, you might say something like, maybe if you were to translate it figuratively into modern English, it would be, not so much as a mosquito, even bit an Israelite or something like that. That's the way I see it. But, I mean, it would be nice to call the Egyptians dogs. but that's not what's happening. I mean, certainly they were killed like dogs in the end of in the last plague. God took his revenge on this evil, sick nation that worshipped the sun god and a pantheon of vile, disgusting gods.
All right, verse 8. And this is interesting too, because now we read earlier that Moses and Aaron was brought back, or that Pharaoh quickly called for Moses and Aaron. And so this is Moses speaking to Pharaoh of what's about to happen. And it says, verse 8, وَيَرْدُ كُلُّ عَبْدَيْكَ إِلَيْ إِلَيْ وَيَشْتَهُ لِي لِمُورٍ. Say, أَتَى بَكُلْ عَامْ أَشَرْ يُرَقْ لَيْخَ وَأَخْرِخَيْنِ إِيتَي وَيَتِ مَعِنْ بَرْءُ بَحْرِيَاف. And so Moses is explaining, all these servants of yours will come to me. They will come down to me. Okay, and they shall prostrate themselves to me, saying, get out, you and all the people who follow after you, and after that I will leave. And so then he left from the presence of Pharaoh, which means really angry.
Right. So a couple questions. So this is Moshe talking to Pharaoh.
Yeah.
Right. So Yardu kol avdecha elai elai. So basically now Moses is getting getting really tough, he's talking to Aaron, I guess, officially, but for a guy who didn't want the job, he's basically threatening, the leader of the free world. It would be like someone walking up to the president of the United States and saying, whatever, either you do such and such or your nation's going to be destroyed. And Pharaoh is scared of him at this point because Pharaoh isn't doing a damn thing. Pharaoh isn't throwing him in jail, isn't listening. He's basically, so the response is, oh, Moses, please, Moses, stop doing this. And, you're being very bad, Moses. But he ain't doing a damn thing. So he's now waking up and starting to realize that this God, this Yehovah, dude is not just a figment of Moses' imagination, that his nation is in the process of being completely decimated by this God that he said at the beginning of the process, I don't know who Yehovah is and I won't listen to him and get out of my face, basically flicked him away like a little fly. Now he's got Pharaoh's attention.
And the interesting thing is that whenever Moses left originally, when he originally left from Pharaoh and he went to Midian after he killed the Egyptian, it says that Pharaoh, who happened to be when he left, was looking to kill Moses. So that he had it within his authority,
right,
as the king of Egypt, to kill him at any time he wanted to, but he didn't.
Right, that's why he had to flee to Midian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, after the whole incident with the beating the or killing the Egyptian.
Mm-hmm.
And now it says also that Moses left Bahariaf, which literally, it's always translated in great anger. Literally, it means something like with fiery nose, with flames coming out of his nose is the figurative expression there. And so Moses now, he's the one showing anger towards Pharaoh. The tides are changing, but Pharaoh's stubbornness, his hardened heart, is still going to cause him to take his own nation completely to the edge of destruction and then over the edge.
Yep.
Okay.
So verse 9. ويؤمر أدوناي لموسى لو يسمع عليكم فارعوه لما أنا ربط مفاتاي بأرض مصرعيم. And so Adonai says to Moses that Pharaoh will not listen to you. Now this is Aleichem, this is Moses and Aaron. So that, or for the purpose being that my miracles shall multiply against the land of Egypt.
Right. So there's a reason given here why Yehovah is hardening Pharaoh's heart, and that reason is because he wants to make a big show out of the whole thing. He doesn't just want to do one plague and Pharaoh submits. No, he wants a spectacle. He wants the whole world to know, that he's God, and he wants this huge, spectacle that goes on for, until the very end, till the bitter end.
And we saw that earlier, if I can find it again. About it. It basically says that the whole point of this is so that not only the Egyptians, but the Israelites will be able to relate this to Saper, or so that you will relate this to your sons and to your grandsons. What he brought against Egypt. Where is that? I think it's in chapter 10. Get back there. Just 1 second. Yeah. ולמען תספר באוזני בנך ובן בנך את אשר התעללתי במצרים ואת חטאתי אשר שמתי בם וידעתם כי אני אדוני. So that is also the whole point of this spectacular thing is not only that the Egyptians will be glad to get rid of the Israelites, but so that the Israelites themselves will never forget. And that's one of the themes throughout the Tanakh, even until after the exiles, was about how God brought them up out of Egypt.
Well, it's the main thing. The main remembrance we're supposed to have about what Yehovah did for us as a nation is the Exodus, right? Everything is Zachel Yetziat Mitzrayim, as a remembrance to the going out of Egypt, which is very interesting. Why it says in the end of days, the miracles that God will do in bringing the Israelites back from the four corners of the earth will be so great that what happened in Egypt, that it will no longer be said. It will no longer be said Yehovah who brought the Israelites out of Egypt, but it'll be Yehovah who brought the Israelites back from the north and the south and the east and the west and the four corners of the earth. I think that's Jeremiah 9:16 or 16:9. I always get confused. But that just goes to show how much greater the miracles of the end of days, which may be upon us right now, possibly, are going to be, even greater than this Exodus, which was a huge spectacle and which has been remembered for 3,000 years by Israelites and by the entire world to a certain degree.
Yep. Verse 10. ומשה ואהרון עשו את כל המופתים האלה לפני פרעה ויחזק אדוני את לב פרעה ולא שלח את בני ישראל מארצו. And so Moses and Aaron did all of these miracles before Pharaoh, but Adonai hardened the heart of Pharaoh so that he would not send the children of Israel from his land. And now we get to a really cool chapter. I think this is where we started.
Pharaoh's being a bad boy, and so he's... Yeah.
So, chapter 12, verse 1. وَيَوْمَرْ أَدَنَي إِلَى مُوشَى وَإِلَى أَهَرَونَ بِأَرْضِ مِصْرَيِّم لَيْمُوتُ. And Adonai spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, Can you hear me?
I hear you fine.
Okay. I thought you said something.
No. I mean, I think so.
So this is God speaking to Moses and Aaron while they were in the land of Egypt, saying, so this is before they left. So now we come to the beginning of our years and how we keep our calendar according to the Torah. Contrary to what many people think, we don't begin our year in the ninth month. Or in any other month.
It's in the 7th month, I mean, right. what's so sickening about this is the incredible arrogance of the rabbis in just completely upturning what the Torah says and thinking that they have the right to do that. It's more than they have the right to do it. It's basically like a cult. And when you have a cult, cult leaders will basically disconnect you from reality on purpose to get you into their cult, and to test your loyalty to the cult. It's a sick, rabbinical Judaism is a sick cult. And I think it was Daniel Al-Kumisi who points out that what the rabbis did in changing the calendar is he likens it to Rechavam. I'm sorry, to Yeravam. When Yeravam set up his northern kingdom in Israel, it says that besides creating two golden calves as the new gods of the northern kingdom of Israel, excuse me, just a little bit of coronavirus, excuse me, and that he what was I going to say? Yeah, he established a new holiday like Sukkot on the 15th day of the 8th month, right? So he upended the calendar with arrogance. Okay, that's exactly what the rabbis did. They established a new year on the first day of the 7th month. It's disgusting. It's sickening. It's arrogant, and it's no wonder that throughout thousands upon thousands of years, people have despised the Pharisees. From Jesus right down through the Nazis. Okay, now you look at what the New Testament says about Pharisees. I mean, I love it. If I were any stupider, I would I'd become a Christian. But thank God I'm not that stupid. But oh, sorry, I'm insulting one of the great Karaites who goes around and tells these people that they're not complete idiots for worshiping a dead Jew. At any rate, with the Nazis, again, it's a very blurry story, but then apparently the Karaites had a certain amount of protection, or had protection under the Nazis. And it wasn't just the Karelars who had, rejected the Torah, but I think it was perhaps the Crimean Karaites, or I can't remember exactly. I don't know all the details. Maybe you know it better offhand. I'd have to look it up again.
One of the interesting
but at any
things
rate,
about
there's what's that?
Yeah. One of the interesting things about the story,
I just want to
I'll
finish
let you
the point.
and then go ahead.
Okay. Just a very quick point that even the Nazis saw the Pharisees as disgusting enemies of God, and understood on a very, very basic level that those who truly cling to the Torah, the Karaites, are not the enemies of the world, but those who reject, the Nazis, were certainly not. Some of them probably were biblical scholars, but they even understood on a very visceral basis that there's something really wrong with the Pharisees, and that they're essentially destroyers of the world, whereas the Karaites are upholders of the Old Testament. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, we're talking about this protection under the Nazis, and there's lots of misinformation being spread about what actually happened that made the separation between the Karaite community in Europe and the rabbinic community in Europe or wherever else in the world. The Karaites, they basically spread out. They went to Turkey, and then rabbinical Jews followed the Turkey. They went to Crimea, they followed the Crimea. They went to Europe, the western part of Europe, Spain and Germany. They followed them there, and everywhere that the rabbinical Jews followed the Karaites, they wouldn't leave them alone. They couldn't. It wasn't enough that they just left them alone. They had to harass them so much because they would not submit to rabbinic authority. That was the whole point.
Right.
And we read in rabbinic writings, we have plenty of evidence. And anybody who wants it, I can send it to you. Just contact me on Facebook. I'll send you all the proof you need about what's going on. In Turkey, for instance, the Karaites wrote to the rulers of Turkey, said, look, please talk to these rabbinical Jews. They're driving us nuts. They harass us at every turn, and so forth. You have rabbinic Jewish memoirs and writings in Spain and Germany where the rabbinic rabbis actually hunted Karaites. It even tells you they hunted. They had their own inquisition. It wasn't enough. They had to live through the inquisition of the Christians. The rabbinites made an inquisition looking for any form of Karaism. And they would actually have public floggings in the Jewish communities and beat people to death. Okay, so this is the background of
Make no
what's
mistake,
going on.
they would do the same. They would do the same today in Israel if they gained power.
Right.
That's why
And
we
so
have to gain
make no
power.
mistake.
We have to do that to the Pharisees, because I'm not Donald Trump, man. I fight fire with fire. If someone wants to do something to me, I'll do it to them, their mother, their grandmother, their great grandmother. I'll dig up their dead relatives and flog them to death again. I don't
But
play
anyway,
games.
the point is, this is the background to what's about to happen at the time of Catherine the Great. The Karaite community says, look, we are sick and tired of rabbinic interference. It was bad enough that they had to be lumped in the same boat with the rabbis and face persecution from the Christian world over this issue of Jesus, right? And that's the whole point that they got all that crap and were kicked out. Anyway, so in the 1800s, you had, well, actually the 1700s, I think it was, you had a group of Karaite Hakhams who went to Catherine the Great, and they said, look, we were put here since the time of Shalmaneser, when he exiled the kingdom of Israel. We weren't even in southern Israel when Jesus was killed. So we are not Judeans, is the idea that they were getting at. They never said we weren't Israelites. They never said we didn't have anything to do with the Torah. That's not what they were saying. They're saying, look, we aren't these Jews or Judeans, which is actual what it means in the Tanakh. When you say Jew, it's actually talking about people from the southern kingdom of Judea. And so that's all they're doing. And so whatever proof they had, Catherine the Great said, okay, we accept it. And from that point on, they were no longer taxed the way with these strong double taxes of the Jews. The Karaites were allowed to have property. It gave them real independence.
Oops, I don't know what happened.
Far above what the rabbinical Jews had. And that independence that was granted under Catherine the Great was actually extended throughout the different European kingdoms that came later. They accepted the distinction that Catherine the Great afforded these people. Okay, and so that's the background of what's going on. Don't think that they're saying, oh, we left the religion of the Israelites and that we aren't Israelites anymore. That's not what was being said. Later, Firkovich came along and actually tried to prove that there were at least parts of the Karaites in Europe were basically Turks, or they were part of this Khazarian conversion, which even is reported in the Khuzari. They talk about that. And of course, today they try to lay that blame at the feet of Firkovich, Avram Firkovich, which isn't true. He's not the one who started that. He was 9 years old when the delegation went to speak to Catherine the Great. But it's easy to lay it at his feet because they try to say he was a liar, and he did make forgeries, evidently. And so that's what they want to do. Say, oh, that was all just a big lie, because they're trying to hide what actually happened. But the background of that was the cruel treatment that the rabbinical Jews was giving to Karaites wherever they went in the world. They couldn't get away from it.
Yeah. I hear you.
Anyway, back to the Torah. So, verse 2. HaChodesh hazeh lechem rosh chodeshim. Rosh chodeshim. Rishon hu lechem. So he
by
says,
the way, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah,
I think rabbis use the lachem, if I remember correctly. They say, oh, because it says lachem, that they have that we human beings have the right to set when the first month is. I believe that's their midrash on that verse.
Well, that if that's the true, he says, I shall be a God for you. that means we have the right to choose who our God is.
Yeah, exactly.
What stupidity!
And so many other places, right? Mm-hmm.
Anyways, this month for you, it is the head of the months. It is the first for you of the month of the year.
Right.
So this is the month of Aviv.
Yep.
Verse 3. دبروا إلى كل عادات إسرائيل לאמור בעשר לחודש הזה ויקחו להם איש שא לבית אבות שא לבית.
And by the way, if I may point out that we're talking about it, it's very important to make a distinction between the rules that were given for the first Passover and the rules that are given for the holiday Passover. Seriously, because I met some crazy people who on the 10th of the month they'll take a lamb into their house, and on Passover they walk around with their loins girded and their staff in their hand. And these were all commandments for the first Passover. These are not the commandments for the commemoration. If you want to do it, go right ahead, but don't say that the Torah tells you have to sit with your loins girded and a staff in your hand, because that was only for the first event.
Right, and we see it even in the book of Ezekiel when it talks about. In fact, we don't see this actual process happening anywhere in the Tanakh until we get to the book of Ezekiel, where he's talking about the restoration of the temple and its services, and it gets to the Pesach sacrifice. It talks about taking the blood and putting it on the mezuzot of the bait. Okay, so that's at the temple now, and not because we have to understand how can we keep Pesach in our homes when we're told we have to be in Jerusalem during this event.
That's a very good point. Exactly.
And so the only place you do your sacrifices for Pesach is specifically is at the Mishkan or at the temple now, and it's the Kohanim who officiate, and they take the blood and they put it on the mezuzot of the bayit, and that's what we see in Ezekiel. So speak to the entire congregation of Israel, saying, on the 10th of this month, that they shall take for them each man a lamb according to the paternal houses, the Beit Avot. This is where we have another interesting thing here. Each a lamb for each house. Verse 4. وإم يمعات حبايث محيوت مسي ولقحه وشخنا حكروا إلى بيتهم بمخصات نفشوت إيش لفي أخلو تخص على حسي. Where was I? Oh, and if the household will be too small for a single lamb, then him and his neighbor shall take, or the neighbor's talking about one near to him. Okay, according to the number of the souls, each man according to his eating, you shall count or reckon the lamb. And the reason why is because you want to eat it in that night, because the next night they're leaving. They didn't want to leave anything till the morning, which we'll read in a minute. Whatever's left of this had to be burnt, so they didn't want to waste it.
Right. It's more than that. This is the holy Passover sacrifice, and you're not supposed to have a whole bunch of it left over sitting around rotting until the morning. Right. So you want to be as judicious as possible to make sure that you're not going to have a huge amount of meat left over, which is then going to have to be burnt or thrown out.
So this is what I want to read to all the Yeshua files out there who think that Jesus is the Passover. This is what God says the Passover is. Say Thamim, Zachar ben Shana, Yihye Lachem, Min HaKavazim, ومنها عزيم تقاحه. A perfect lamb, a year-old
Unblemished.
male, unblemished, famim.
Right.
A year-old male shall be for you. From the sheep or from the goats, you shall take it. Now, this is interesting because Jesus, according to some reports, was 33 and a half. He's a little bit older than a year old, I would say. He was not only circumcised, which would be a blemish, he was beaten to a pulp. All right. And so just to get past this subject, I get these questions often in my emails. Jesus was in no way, shape, or form the Pesach sacrifice.
That's a good point, but I don't think that Christians will really believe that Jesus was literally the Passover sacrifice. They'll say that he replaced the Passover sacrifice, and once he was sacrificed, as an innocent lamb, then we no longer needed, these primitive animal sacrifices. He was the modern version of the sacrifice, and after that, all sacrifices are disbanded anyway because he was the final sacrifice.
Well, even so, if we want to say that he replaced the Pesach sacrifice,
right,
and it was because of sin, which is basically the idea of Christianity, that he died for sin.
Sure.
According to the Torah, the sin offering for the congregation of Israel was a bull, and it was to be burnt.
Right.
So,
well, good luck convincing your Christian friends.
Part of it was to be burnt. Part of it was to be burnt, and part of it was to be eaten.
Right.
Anyway, but this is just nonsense. Yeah. So, verse 6. وحيا لكم لمشمارث عد 14 يوم لخودش הזה وشحتו אותו كل كحال عادات ישראל בין הארבעים. And it shall be kept in charge or under guard until the 14th day of this month. Okay. Now I want to make it clear that whatever month it is, they were still in Egypt, which is what we began with, and God spoke to Moses there.
It's clear what month it is, but okay.
Yeah, so he's saying what month, but what I'm getting at is he's telling these people to take the lamb, okay, and he said that they are to take it on the 10th day. So my guess would be that this was spoken before the 10th day of the month, okay? Because if he was saying on the 10th, then, and if they were speaking past the 10th or even on the 10th, he'd just say take it. But anyway, so my guess is that it's before the 10th, because he's telling the Israelites on the 10th day of this month they shall take a lamb, okay, and do these things,
right? And
it shall be kept until the 14th day of that month, and then the entire congregation of the Israelites shall slaughter or sacrifice it between the evenings. There's a lot about Bein HaArbaim. But
so how do you interpret Bein HaArbaim, Yaakov?
The Bein HaArbaim, in my opinion, you have the time when the sun begins to set, and then you have the actual sunset itself, and then you have a period after sunset until the light goes out of the sky and it's completely dark. So it's at the point where the sun is set. That's, in my opinion, between the evenings. And the reason why I say that is because we see.
So you're saying it's between sunset and darkness?
Yeah, that's what I.
That's what I. Yeah, that's the way I interpret it.
Yeah, and the reason why I come to that conclusion is because of what's said elsewhere, especially in Deuteronomy chapter 16. It tells you when you sacrifice the Pesach, which would be
Right.
at the setting of the sun.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
And Bo Hashemesh.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Anyway, verse 7. I'm not sure. I have to look again and see what the Eliyahu says.
Mm-hmm.
I think they have some other idea of it.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, verse 7. وَلَحْهُ مِنْ هَدَامٍ وَنَتَنُوا عَلَى شِتَيْ حَمَزِزُوث وَعَلَى حَمَشْكُوف عَلَى حَبَاتِيم أَسِرْ يُخْلُ أُثُوبَ بَهِمْ.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I just want to. I went over this idea of the mezuzah
Mm-hmm.
in a conversation. Some of the guys who are here, I actually read the debate that I was having with some rabbinic Jews about this. But it says, "You shall take of the blood, and you shall put it upon the two mezuzot." A mezuzah is actually the post, one of the two posts where you have a door attached to it. Okay.
Right.
And it's also you have a mezuzah on the gate. So on the gates, that those posts that hold the gate, or where the gate would be set in, that's also called the mezuzah in the Tanakh. The mashkof is this part that is at the top between the two.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what it's called in English. I think it's called a lentil.
I think they call it a lentil. Lentil or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But
But
that's
the
the
mashkof is
mashkof.
the thing on the top, and the mezuzot. That's why you have
Or
two
the
mezuzot
mezuzah.
and one mashkof. Yeah, they're the sidebars. And it just goes again to show. I remember a couple years ago I did when I was doing the Shabbat studies on my own. I did a series on the importance of walls and gates and doors in the Tanakh. It appears literally hundreds of times throughout. And so this is the idea of a door, of a gate, or of a house is very important because the the wall protects the house or protects the city, and the door, the gate, and the door are basically the only way through. That's why sometimes it says what was it when we read the blessings at the end of Genesis? Was it Joseph? He said, no, it was Joseph. I can't remember who it was. You'll inherit the gate of your enemies, right? So this is right. So this is it's very important, and so we see here that there are words that very specifically describe each of the elements of a gate or of a door. You have the mezuzah, you have the mashkof, you have the what is it? The manul, the lock, the bariach, which is the bolt, and all kinds of different words that describe in great detail doors and gates and walls and stuff like that. So we see that here, that these words, these technical terms are being used, which would have been known to any ancient Israelite because of the importance of walls and doors and gates and locks and bars.
Absolutely.
And
And I'd also like to point out several things. When we talk about the mezuzah, right, we have this blood that's put upon the mezuzah and the meshkov, but then we see in Devarim 6, in Deuteronomy 6, it talks about "Uchatavtam ala mezuzot beitecha uvish'arecha," and you shall write them upon the mezuzah of your homes as well as your gates. Okay, this is talking about the mezuzah of your gates and the mezuzah of your home.
Right.
And you have to understand that we have the writing of the Torah, symbolically, as some people would say, upon the mezuzah of our homes as well as upon the mezuzah of our gates. The gates are always symbolic of the places of judgment. Anytime you go to your elders for judgment, especially in jurisprudence against your neighbor or your son or whoever had committed a crime, you go to these gates. which technically, if you think about it, these would be where the actual Torah would have been written on. So there'd be no doubt about judgment. Now, whether that's literally how that would be, you think about it. Our homes is where we live personally, and our gates are where our judicial representatives would sit. So we have the Torah before us every day at home, as well as in our courts, because we have to keep it at home first. If everyone keeps Torah personally at home, you won't have to worry about going before a judge, will you? But in the case you do go before a judge, we have to judge according to the Torah. We have to do it faithfully and with equity between parties, And so that's what it's talking about. We keep we're to speak about these commandments as we sit in our homes, before we go to when we wake up, before we go to sleep, when we're sitting in our homes, when we're walking around outside, and that's what I try to do every day of my life.
And if I can also point out that, as we've mentioned, because I've mentioned a number of times before, that the reason the gate is the place of judgment, and the gate is at the end of Mishlei, the famous Eshet Chayil, right? Noda b'sha'arim ba'ala b'shito im ziknei aretz, right? He shall be known in the gates as he sits with the elders of the land, right? So why is the gates? The gates is where the gates of the city, or right inside the gates of the city, is where all the action occurred, because this is where people were passing. This is the only place you could pass in and out of a walled city, was through the gates, right? So basically the way that these ancient walled cities were set up, and even modern walled cities, are, once you walk inside the gate, you usually have a plaza that was called the Richava, and you usually have this big plaza, and that's where all of the municipal and public activities took place. You had the elders sat there, the judges sat there, public readings of the Torah took place there. Marketplaces were there, all the action, the gossip, municipal services were, whatever municipal services they had were there, etc. So right inside the gates is basically, it would be like the modern town square, or equivalent to the modern town square.
That's right. And also just to finish my point about the mezuzah and the commandment, and you shall write them upon the mezuzah of your homes and your gates. No matter how you want to look at it, making an amulet and rolling up a few little verses and sticking it in a protective seal and placing
where you can't even see it, where you can't even see it.
Right. It has nothing to do with the commandment. And I'll tell you why.
That's right.
First, rabbinical Judaism wants to tell you it's only these verses talking about the mezuzah that you write and put on there, right? But that's not what it says. It says these words I'm speaking to you today, which I am commanding you. This is in the present tense, what he's in the process of speaking to you. Right. And I've made the point a million times. You have to understand the context. Moses is in the plain of Moab. This is just before his death. And it says he began to expound upon the Torah. And it's that day when you start at the very first chapter of Deuteronomy, he went through that. Everything you see up until the end of his speaking happened in one day. He's speaking all this before the Israelites that one day. And then, of course, he finishes it talks about how he finishes up. He finishes writing the book, and he hands it to the Kohanim and the elders of Israel. And then, of course, he dies. So what are the words that you're supposed to write upon the gates of your home, or the mezuzah of your home and your gates? It's all the words that he spoke. It's the entire Torah. So that's how we know that when it talks about the totafot, which is a zikaron, we know that the Torah explains to you what a totafot is a zikaron between your eyes and on your arm. Between your eyes is just like saying keeping it before you. So all the words that you're to write, it doesn't have anything to do with a box, which they guess at, coming from an Egyptian word, a Coptic word, meaning square or whatever. But the point is, all the words that he's speaking at that day before the Israelites, which is the entire Torah, along with the explanations that he's speaking to them about, is to be written. None of that's going to fit in a little small 2x2 box stuck to your.
Well, I have an idea. I have an idea for the rabbinites so they can keep the Torah better in this day and age. That instead of putting it in the stupid boxes, maybe what they should do is tape like one of those, like an electronic ticker across their heads, and then they could just like scroll the entire Torah continuously. They could walk around, the shuk like in Machane Yehuda, or be on the bus, and you could have like Deuteronomy 13:7, 13:8, could scroll across, and maybe on their arms as well. I don't know. Maybe they can have Rashi on their, flashing on their arms. Because the rabbis say that it's Losh B'Shamayim He, so they can change the Torah, right, whenever they pretty much please. So why not update it for the modern age instead of putting in the stupid, cow boxes? Just The
interesting thing about their idea of Lo B'Shamayim He,
good idea.
Okay, when we read that actual in context, the context of this commandment or this saying Lo B'Shamayim He, that it is not in the heavens.
Or like a recording. Volky says like a recording. They can have like a little recording going out of their head at all times.
There you go.
Walk around.
This passage, Lo B'Shamayim He, that the rabbis use to show their control over the Torah,
right? It
has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that don't ask who's going to ascend to the heavens for us and bring it to us that we can hear it, obey it, and keep it, or who's going to cross the seas because it's in our mouth. We have it right here, and this is why we have to read it daily and talk about it daily and keep it constantly in our memory and practice it for our children daily.
Well, of course, we can expect the rabbis, as usual, to completely distort the meaning of the verse, which they did. They again take the opposite meaning. The whole idea is that you don't of that verse is it's so simple and so straightforward. You don't need complex rabbinical interpretations, and yet they took it to say exactly that that the complex rabbinical interpretations are sanctioned by that verse. It's disgusting.
Yeah. I actually had a discussion about the same idea of how they changed the meaning of the words in the Tanakh to fit their own pleasure. And so someone challenged me. He said, "Give me proof that the rabbis have actually changed the meaning of the words." And so I gave them the example of Exodus 35:3, where it says, "Lo tavaru aish b'moshe v'teicham b'yom hashabbat." You shall not allow a fire to burn in your homes on Shabbat. And I showed how in the commentary of Rashi, it's so interesting. In the commentary of Rashi, he doesn't use the PL form, which is actually what's used in the verse. He has to, in order to make it say what the rabbis say, he had to use the Hithil form. And so he says, Hiv'ara is what's talking about, which is talking about the lighting of the fire. And that's where they get this idea of lighting the Shabbat candles before Shabbat. And that's not actually what's even being talked about. But anyhow, back to the Torah.
Talking about there, because I know you.
You cut out, man. Look, I don't hear you anymore. I think we're having a lag, a technical difficulty.
Wait, can you hear me now?
Yep, I hear you now.
So how do you interpret Exodus 35:3? Because I know you recently put something on Facebook. I didn't get a chance to read it, but let's hear your, and then I'll give my interpretation very quickly.
At face value, the way I understand it is that it says you shouldn't allow a fire to burn in your homes during the Shabbat. How it's applied, that I leave that up to everybody else. They can figure it out for themselves. Personally, I wouldn't allow the fire to burn. We've talked about that before.
So how would you have kept warm in? How would you have kept warm in ancient Israel, which can get, I can tell you from personal experience, can get pretty darn cold in certain places.
Well, how did I keep warm here? I believe it gets
Well,
just as cold here where I live as it does
yes, but you have
anywhere
heating
in
in
Israel. I
your
don't use
apartment.
you, you know this personally. I don't use any heat in my home. You turned it on when you were here.
Uh,
Remember?
I don't
We've
remember.
never
So you
used
stay in the you keep it even when it gets like in the 20s. You don't have any heat,
no heat at all. None.
and
Uh,
there's no
we have
central heating in
always
your building.
listen. There is, but we don't use it. And we don't not only use it on Shabbat, we don't use it anytime at any time during the year. Uh, and it gets sometimes it can get to like 8 or 9 below zero. What is that? Celsius. I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit.
Whatever.
But the
And
point
what is the reason that
we
you
have
engage in this strange practice?
because we don't need it. Honestly, now all we have are block walls, like you yourself see. All we have are concrete block walls. You know, there's not any significant insulation. The point is our home stays warm enough for us, even without using the heat. So
I don't
I would
know.
have to have a fire burning in my home just to say warm. Now I'm not saying that you don't have to have that like in other places like where it's really
No,
really cold. If it's
that's
cold, then
utterly
that's up to you.
ridiculous. Even if it's not as cold, because we had temperatures here that were in Fahrenheit in the low 30s and high 20s, and in places of the house that were not heated, it was absolutely unbearable to be in there. So I don't know. Maybe your family does. I don't know. Maybe you're genetically different
Well,
from
I'm just
most human
saying we
beings.
don't ever use
But
it. Now I don't know how it
I'm
is in
sorry,
other
but
homes. Yeah, I'm just saying.
well, you've got to have
I
some
don't know
heat
how it
coming in
is in other
somewhere, or else
homes.
you'd be. I can't imagine. There
We
must
don't
be some
use
kind
any
of
heat.
central heating
Now
somewhere.
how no we don't we have our heat. These are these radiators heat.
Yeah.
You had to turn them on when you were here. In fact, when you and Volky would come back and we'd meet in the evening, we'd sit in the kitchen and y'all would turn it on because for you
I
guys it
kind of
was too
remember that.
cold. But for my wife and I and most of my family, it's comfortable in our home. You know, year round. We don't have air conditioning, and we don't use the heat. You know,
Well,
but I'm not
I
saying
mean,
that's
the
the
air
way it is
conditioning
for
is one thing,
everybody.
but I'm sorry, that's not normal for whatever reason.
Yeah,
But if, if it dips below a certain temperature, it is, I mean, like I said, right here, recently it was extremely cold, and we had to constantly be heating different sections of the house, and the areas of the house where we didn't heat, I literally couldn't even enter. It was so frigid. Now the temperatures are more back
yeah.
to normal, but that's,
It,
and not only
it,
that,
it
but if there weren't heat on, it would just basically you just have to sit wrapped in blankets, barely being able to move. So I don't know. That's very strange. But for the
no,
average person, they need
yeah.
heat on a daily basis
Well, like I
in the
said,
winter.
it may be. I'm not using my situation as an excuse for anybody not doing it. I'm just saying for
Right.
me personally, uh, how we do it, we don't need it. And in fact,
Okay.
before we got these two terrorists that we have at home, these two cats, uh, I used to leave the window open even when it was snowing outside in our bedroom. You can ask my
That's
wife about that.
strange.
She used to.
That's
Now
strange. I don't know.
she used to complain about that. But
I
even
don't know how your
now,
wife.
I
I don't
can't.
know how your wife puts up with that. Aside from the
No,
fact that
she
she's
would
northern
she
Russia,
would
but
complain. She would say no, that's too much. But she'd tell you I used to sleep with the window open even if it was snowing outside. Didn't bother me. But now even now
uh
we our windows, they're not like American homes, where you pick them up. I don't know if all American homes are like that, but the ones I used to live in,
right,
you pick the window up from the bottom or
right,
drop it down from the top.
sure,
Here, they kind of open like a door, or that
right,
you can basically kip
slide,
them open.
right,
Yeah,
right,
they
right.
kip open at the top, and so even now it snowed here. It was snowing the last few days.
Mm,
We keep the windows, the balcony doors is open, cracked open
mm,
at the top, and also our window in
right.
the bedroom, and it's still comfortable uh, here.
No, I
So
can't account for the bizarre behaviors of certain outliers, but normal person needs heat in the winter. And if they don't have it, it becomes completely unpleasant. So, at any rate, my interpretation of the verse is a little bit different, and I think the only prohibition on Shabbat is milacha, and that Exodus 35:3, which is that would have been the classic example of a milacha, of work on Shabbat, because it takes a lot of work to get a fire going, right? And you have the example of the Mikoshesh Etzim, the person who went around and gathered the wood on Shabbat, and he was put to death for doing so, and because it was work. It's a lot of work to go out into the fields and start gathering wood. So my interpretation of that, I kind of actually agree with the rabbis on this one, and even more so, I think that you can continue to stoke the fire on Shabbat as long as everything is prepared and all you're doing is a minimal amount of work. Like, let's say you have the fire going before Shabbat goes on. You don't want to start the fire on Shabbat because it's milacha. And then over Shabbat, you're just stoking it. You're throwing another log in every so often. That's not a lot of milacha. So I think basically that's just being used as an example of, the classic form of milacha that would or could be done on Shabbat that is and should be avoided, and that the only real prohibition on Shabbat is not to do milacha. That's my interpretation.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. But not only that, it's this whole idea of sitting in the dark and the cold is something that the rabbis have used to mock the Karaites, and rightfully so. The Karaites, in my opinion, should be mocked for such a thing, and it is a unique example of over-literalization that the Karaites do and have done. And this is where the rabbis get this idea that the Karaites over-literalize the Torah or literalize the Torah, which is not true at all. Tefillin is just the opposite. It's the rabbis that are literalizing. But because the rabbinites have made such a, what do they say, cause célèbre out of this one issue of the Karaites literalizing the Torah to the point where it becomes ridiculous, and they're sitting in the cold and the dark on Shabbat, they spread this false rumor that the Karaites always over-literalize this Shabbat, when usually it's the rabbis that do that.
Yeah.
Anywho.
There's different ways to look at it. There certainly is.
For sure. It's,
I've got my reasons for it.
Absolutely. Right?
That's right. Absolutely. And that I love that. I love it.
Right.
Yep.
And that's the beauty of being a Karaite, that we don't have the arrogance of the rabbis, where we think we know all the answers. We're humble servants of Yehovah. We're searching the scriptures well and trying to come to the right conclusion. And when someday God makes his re-entrance to the world and makes his will known, then we'll know what the right thing to do is. Until then, this is the best we can do.
And one thing you have to look at too is, and someone else asked me, and I'll say this and then we'll move on.
Sure.
I used to be a fanatic at one time about certain things, but now I've kind of loosened up in my old age. I guess because in your old age you actually get a little bit more wisdom.
Yeah.
Not only book smarts, but you actually get practical living wisdom. And when it comes to certain things, we have this idea about you should preserve life. Life is a precious gift, and even God says, I set before you today blessing and the curse, life and death. All right. Life if you keep those things that I tell you to do, and death if you don't. But one thing we have to look at is there's certain things in the Tanakh, in the Torah, that you're not allowed to do. But there's actually no penalty of death for every single thing. Like if you violate the Torah, for instance, you don't die just because you violate a certain thing. There's certain things that you don't
capital
do
crimes.
Yeah, now that's what I'm getting at. Fire is one of them. There's actually no death penalty for starting a fire or keeping a fire, and we see that even with, for instance, you talked about the being able to keep stoking a fire during the Shabbat. The only other place that you have the verb bi'er, which is the PL form, used in connection with fire is in Leviticus chapter 6, where it talks about the says Uvi Eir Aleha 8 is, and you shall stoke or add to it wood. Talking about the altar. The fire of the altar was never, ever, ever allowed to go out.
That's right.
And so
that's a
you
good
look
point.
at the
Yeah,
idea,
I never made that connection before, but yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and so there's two different things we have to talk about. Every evening, the Kohen goes into the Mishkan and he lights the menorah. That's number one. Every morning it says he puts them out. He put them out every morning. So they didn't burn all day. They only burned in the evening. Okay. And when you talk about having light in your home or whatever, the idea, in fact, it tells you in the Torah the reason why you have the menorah in the Mishkan is so that the Kohanim will have light when they come in and do their service. So the light's put out in the daytime. That's what it says. The menorah in the Mishkan is to be put out, and so the Kohen can do his service even without a burning menorah during the day. And our homes would be really no different. The only time we would need a light per se would be from the evening of Friday evening, okay, until Saturday morning. That's the only dark time during the Shabbat. Unless you live somewhere like in Alaska where it might be 6 months of darkness. That's a different thing. But anyway,
so what is your point?
I can't remember now. I'm just saying.
Now do you still hold by the idea that Shabbat only goes from morning till night?
No. What I was getting at. Here's the point I was getting at.
Right.
I used to be asked questions of what would you do if somebody put a gun to your head and say, eat these pig nuts, I used to say, well, I'd let them just blow my brains out. I wouldn't care. I wouldn't do it when I was earlier. That was when I was younger, But now when you think about it, to eat something unclean, the only thing you have to do, now, of course, it tells you not to eat it, all right? There's a commandment, don't eat from anything unclean. But you don't die because you've eaten something unclean. It says you have to wash yourself and wait till the evening, and then everything's all good again, okay? And so if it doesn't itself, the violation of it doesn't itself guarantee a death sentence, then I would say, if it's to save a life, then do it. The only place I would technically draw a line, and the reason why I would draw that line is where if you violate the Torah, you're going to die anyway. Okay. And for instance, if they tell you I have to worship Jesus or whatever, because idolatry is a death sentence. Right. So that means even if it was to save my life today, I'm still technically under a death sentence because idolatry is a crime. And so that's what I'm saying. In my older age, I've kind of mellowed out. I'm not so fanatical about certain things. And that's it. All right, where were we at? Verse 8.
Well, I think also just in interpreting the Torah, you have to use a little bit of common sense as well. You can't disconnect the Torah from real life, and it just, again, the issue of what's that?
Yeah, common sense is very important. That's one of the things that I said. Common sense is very important. That's one of the things that separates
common sense that you, right.
Yeah. So verse 8.
So that's another for me another indication that. Go ahead.
Yeah, verse 8. وآخذوا إت حبصار بالليل هزاي سلي إيش ومتصوف على المرورين يأخذوه. And they shall eat the flesh in that night, or in this night. Roasted fire roasted, or however you want to say that, silly, grilled. I think they use silly as grilled today, but it's fire roasted, I think is what you would say, with matzot, with merurim, which means bitter things, not necessarily bitter herbs. They shall eat it.
Right.
Verse 9, and that's what I was saying earlier. At the first Pesach, they had to eat all of it that night because they were leaving. The idea was we're leaving. That's why they had to sit that night, fully dressed with the shoes on and their staff in their hand. Verse 9. Al tachelu minnu na uvashel mevushal b'mayim ki imseli eish rosha al kira'ah wa al kirbo, and you shall not eat of it anything raw. Na here is raw. You see that same particle used, na,
Right.
in the juicetive form sometimes, but here this is raw, or boiled with water. And that's another thing that's a little bit different. It says uvashel mevushal, because we use this same word in chapter 16, talking about it being boiled. But of course, some people say that it means to be cooked. But only this point is where we're told not to boil it, not any other time. However, it should.
By
be
the way,
roasted
na
with fire
only
and
appears
fed
once
upon-
in the entire Torah.
This word na.
Can you hear me okay?
Oh, you mean for raw? You mean for raw? I hear you. Yeah. There's a little bit of a delay.
Yeah, it only appears once in the entire Torah. I'm not sure why. The word na only appears once in the entire Torah. This juice form that you're talking about, which usually is interpreted as please, I don't think it's the same word at all. It may have the same lettering, but it's completely different.
Yeah, it's a different word. Rather, it should be roasted with the fire. Its head with its kira'ah, which is basically its legs, loins, or however you want to look at it, and also its innards. Verse 10.
Basically, so just to point out there, basically it's a ki'im tzli ish rosho al ve'al kirbo, meaning it's basically like a what's later called a burnt offering in Oleh, where all of the parts are burnt on the altar, none are removed. Here the entire thing is cooked. Yes, the flesh is eaten, but the entire thing is basically cooked. There are no parts that are removed and discarded.
That's right, and his bones aren't broken. And by the morning, it should be completely burnt. So it's going to burn all night, basically. Verse 10. Walo thothiru meminu ad bocher wahanothar meminu ad bocher ba'esh tishrafu, and nothing of it shall remain until the morning. And that which remains of it until morning, you shall burn it in fire.
And here we have a classic example of. Wait, can you hear me okay? 'Cause I don't know what's
I hear
going
you
on.
fine. I hear you fine.
Okay, with no delay?
Well, no, there's just a little bit of a delay.
All right, hold on a second. Let me try something. Is this any better now?
It's still a delay. But it's just a fraction of a second or two.
Okay. What I wanted to say is you have a classic pattern here in the Torah. This is a classic pattern, which I don't know. I guess in rabbinical parlance, you would call it a lechatchila and bidi avad, which basically means, I think they call it a priori and post priori or something like that. So you shouldn't leave it until the morning, right? But if it is left until the morning, then this is what you do with it. You burn it, right?
Yeah.
So those who misinterpret the Torah a lot of times they'll say, oh, this is a contradiction. It says you shouldn't leave it until the morning, and then it says, but if you do leave it, but that which is left is burnt. How can the Torah contradict itself? And it's a misunderstanding of this kind of phraseology, which says, I guess you could say, the preferred thing to do, and then if you can't do it, then this is what you do, right? And we see that pattern a lot in the Torah, which is often misinterpreted by the rabbis.
Yep, that's true. Verse 11. وَخَخَا تُخِلُوا أَثَوْ مُثْنِخِمْ حَجُّرِيم نَعَلَيْخِمْ بِرَجْلِخِمْ وَمَكِّلِخِمْ بِيَدِخِمْ وَأَخَلْتِمْ أَثَوْ بِهِبْحَزَوْن Pesach hu la'adonai. And in this manner you shall eat it. Your loins girded, your shoes or sandals, literally, upon your feet, and your staff in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Which I guess implies that people generally didn't walk around with their shoes on; they walked around barefoot.
In the home.
I'm serious. It's an interesting
It
social insight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your staff in your hands, and you shall eat it bihipazon. There are many commentaries about this word hipazon. Some people say with trepidation or with fear, or it could be just in a hurry. I don't know, but
well, BDB says trepidation, hurried flight. Yeah, it's used 3 times: Exodus 12:11, Deuteronomy 16:3, Isaiah 52. Here we got the Isaiah 52. Oh, I'm sorry, that's 56. But Isaiah 52:12, and in modern Hebrew, for whatever it's worth, chipazon means hurriedly. If you say you're doing something b'chipazon, it means you're doing it in a hurried manner.
Yeah, and that's the way I look at it. Just hurriedly, hurry up, because they've only got a few hours to go. That means just don't hang around at the table and shoot the shit all day, because you got to get ready to go.
Right.
It is a Pesach for Adonai. Adonai's Pesach. Verse 12. وعبرت بأرض مصرين بالليلة هذه وكيفي كل بخور بأرض مصرين مأذام وعد بهما وبقول إلهي مصرين إعسي الشفتين أني أدوناي. And I shall pass throughout the land of Egypt in that night, or in this night, and I shall strike all the firstborn of the land of Egypt, from a man even unto a beast. And all the gods of Egypt I shall prepare judgments. I shall judge these deities of Egypt, because I am Adonai. Verse 13. وهيا هدم لكم لأوف على حبتين أشر أتم شام ورئيتي اتحدام وفسحتي عليهم ولو يحيي بخم ناجف لمشحيت بحكوثي بإرس مصرين. And the blood, and it shall be, this blood shall be for you as a sign, the oath, upon the houses where you shall be, or where you are. And I shall look at the blood. And now this is where you get the idea of Pesach. This is why it's called a Pesach. It says, Pesachti aleichem, which literally means I shall hop over you, is basically what it's talking about. In fact, we see the same verb used by Joshua right before he dies, and he's asking the Israelites, "How long are you gonna hop between two opinions? either you're gonna serve God or whatever else." But this is where you get the
Is that Joshua?
Pesach. I think so. Let me look.
I thought it was Elijah.
No, hang on. Let me find it. It might be Joshua. I mean Elijah. I thought it was.
I'm pretty
I
sure
thought
it's
it was
Elijah.
Joshua.
When he's going to is going to destroy the priests of the Baal.
Give me just a minute.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
What you doing? Yeah, I think you might be right. I think it was probably Elijah.
Yeah, it was, but
I was thinking. I can't find it right now, but I was thinking it was
Yeah.
Joshua when he says, "As for me and my house, we will serve God." But maybe I was thinking on that.
whatever. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so what are we up to?
Yeah, it's 1 Kings 18:21. ويجيش إلياهو يقول هعام ويوم رأت مطاي أتم بوسحيم على شتي حسيبين إم أضناي إلهيم لخو أخراف وإم هباع لخو أخراف ولو عنو هعام أطوب الله. And so Elijah came near to all the people and he says to them, "How long are you hopping?" Posahim, this is the participle. Al Shitay Hasi'atim, which basically means between two opinions. If Adonai, God, then follow after him, and if Baal, then follow after him. But the people did not answer him. What that's that? All right.
Yeah.
So that's why it's called a Pesach. Verse 13 is that. And so I shall hop over you, and there shall be no plague against you as the destroyer, the Mashith, from the Mashith, as I strike the land of Egypt. 14.
No, wait. Let's just focus on that for 1 second, because it says that the mashchit came down, right?
Mm-hmm. The
So
destroyer.
right. So God didn't, as always, as anything God does in this world, he's
We got a bad
pretty
connection again.
much always saying, shoot. How about now?
Yep, I hear you now.
No good? Okay. It says in the rabbinical Passover Haggadah, if I can find it, it says something along the lines of, it wasn't an angel that came down to destroy the Egyptians, but God himself. Let's see if I can find this, which of course contradicts completely what it says here. Okay, so let me just see.
Well, verse 12 actually says, وَعَبَرْتِ بِأَرْضِ مِصْرَيْمَ بَلَيْلَ هَذَيْ وَهِكِيتِ كُلْ بِخَرْ بِأَرْضِ مِصْرَيْمَ. That's actually in verse 12.
Yes, but we know that a lot of times that when it speaks about Yehovah, that it's, as you pointed out many times, that it's
Yep.
really just a euphemism for angel, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's been my opinion for years. And you see different things, like here, you see it in equation. Even in one of the prophetic writings, I think it's Hosea, where he says, and the name shall come, or the name shall be sent, or something like that. It's talking about this angel who has the name of God. This is the one that he told Moses, I'm sending my angel before you to bring you to the place I prepared for you. He shall drive out your enemies before you, but be careful to obey what he says, because my name is in him. And so this is the only one that's why I say it's only one angel who's called the name of God specifically.
And by the way, it's my mistake. It says that the Lord brought us forth from Egypt, not by an angel, not by a seraph, nor by an agent, but by God himself. So it wasn't speaking about destroying Egypt, but bringing us forth from Egypt. Okay.
Well, that's actually not true, because Moses, when he tells you to go to the Edomites, he says, when you go to our brother Esau, you shall say to them, we were in Egypt, we cried out to God, and he sent a malach to bring us out of Egypt. That's actually in Deuteronomy.
That's true. It just goes again to show that the rabbis are just full of dog poopy, as usual.
Yeah, they're coming through. Hang on. I got a few comments. The problem is in my comments screen, there's such a big delay between Facebook and YouTube and here. And then I get busy reading and I don't always pay attention. So I apologize. So James Bond has showed up today. Shalom Chavarim. Shalom James Bond. Yeah. Nicola has a question. Can you comment on the possible different meanings word Pesach takes throughout the night? Okay, yeah, I think we've already covered that. April Scurry. She actually told me where it was. Thank you, April. Got to look at the comments from time to time. Yep, sorry. Okay, so that's everything. I think we've got them all covered. Yeah, okay. Probably better to post on YouTube. All right. So
sounds good.
Yeah. Where are we now? Verse 14. وَهَيَا هَيَوْمْ هَذَا لَكَمْ لِذِكْرَانِ وَهَغُثِمْ أُثُو حَقْ لَأَدُونَي لِدُورَتِكَمْ حُقَّتْ عُلَامْ تَحَقُّهُ. And this day shall be for you as a memorial, and you shall celebrate it as a celebration for Adonai throughout your generations, as an eternal ordinance. You shall celebrate it. Any comments on
that? Let's see here. I'm sorry. So that was verse 13, yeah?
14.
אדם לכם לאות, 14. והיום הזה לכם לזיכרון, לחגותם אותו, חג ליהוה לדורותיכם, חוקת עולם תחגוהו. So it's a zikaron,
Mhm.
and it is a hag. Now, what the rabbis call Rosh Hashanah, or what we call Yom Teruah, is also called the zikaron. It's called zikaron teruah.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
zikaron here, and I think that's the only other holiday that's called a zikaron, if I'm not mistaken. So Hag Hamatzot, or Hag Pesach, and Yom Teruah are called the zikaron. So
Yep.
in this case, Vaya Hayom Hazeh Lechem Zikaron. So here, a remembrance is, clearly it's speaking about remembering this exodus from Egypt. In the case of Yom Teruah, I don't know what it's speaking about remembering, but it is called the Zikaron Teruah. I have my own interpretation of what it means. I've written about on the Qara'im Insights website, but
Oh, yeah.
if it is a memorial to something, Yom Teruah, then we don't really know what it's a memorial for because it's never really mentioned anywhere. So that's
Yep.
one thought that I had. And Shivat
15.
Yamim,
Yep. Go ahead.
verse 15. I'll take this one for the heck of it. Shivat Yamim Matzot Tochelu, ביום הראשון תשביתו שאור מבתיכם, כי כל אוכל חמץ ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מישראל מיום הראשון עד יום השביעי. So for 7 days you shall eat matzot, ach bayom harishon, and this is ba, of course, ba, if you want to interpret it, in the straightforward way, or in the way most people would translate that would be, but on the first day you shall remove, or is literally yeast from your houses. Because anyone who eats chametz, who eats leavened bread, that person, that soul shall be cut off from Israel from the first day to the seventh day. There's a lot to say here, from the first day to the seventh day. So just a couple of things, okay? So Shivat Yamim Matzot Tochelu. So for 7 days you shall eat matzot. Ach b'yom rishon. I don't think the correct interpretation here is, but on the first day you shall remove yeast from your house. But by the first day, because but is one of those prepositions which could be interpreted in a variety of different ways. So by the first day you shall have removed tashbitu. Again, that's the future tense, but the future tense can express a lot of different moods. So I would interpret that here, or I would translate that here. But by the first day, you shall have removed, or you will have removed, yeast from your houses. Okay, or is related to the modern English word sour. That is actually, I think, one of the etymologies that's actually admitted to, going back to the Old Testament. And the reason that it's related to the word sour is, if you've heard of sourdough bread, then you'll understand the connection, because what
Right.
sour does, what yeast does.
That's how they make the bread. Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, that's how
that's the only way
they had to have starters.
They didn't have commercial wheat or baking powder or baking soda. Yep.
And I don't care how long you set bread out, it'll rot before it will actually rise.
It will. Yeah. I mean, you can start sourdough starter by basically you just let flour sit in water, but you have to constantly. There's a whole process where you have to be constantly changing it and reducing it, and if you just let it sit there, it'll just basically go. It'll basically start getting moldy and rot, like you said. So, because there's just not enough yeast in the air to be able to give the concentration needed to make bread before it rots. But the word or is related to the word sour, and we see it in the word sourdough, because if you use the traditional bread making method, then the bread tastes sour. If you ever make or bought sourdough bread, you'll realize how sour it tastes, to the point where it's almost unpleasant. Quite frankly, I'm not a very big fan of sourdough. I am sometimes sourdough bread. At any rate, because anyone who eats chametz, which is leavened bread, And as a as a response to the ridiculous Egyptian Karaite interpretation, no, it does not include cheese. No, it does not include yogurt. No, it does not include kombucha and wine and beer and all of this kind of stuff. Chametz literally means leavened bread. That's all it means. Leavened bread. Nichrata nefesh hahi meIsrael. That soul should be cut off from Israel. Mi yom harishon ad yom hashvi'i, which means that the soul will be cut off only for 7 days, from the first day until the last day, right? Until the seventh day, correct? Yaakov?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also this idea.
Of course, it's not correct. That was a setup.
Yeah, the part is the preposition be. What we're talking about is has many different uses. It can mean against or before or until a certain time. Now, it says b'yom harishon tashbithos or mipatation. Now, we have to understand, the first day of unleavened bread is the 15th day of the month, okay? However, Pesach starts on the 14th day. And it says you were to have matzot with a Pesach meal. So that means before you even had the days of unleavened bread, you already were preparing unleavened bread to eat with Pesach. So by the time you get to the first day, it should have already been taken care of. Okay, so this goes against the idea that they were looking to make regular bread; they just didn't have time to make the bread, so that's why we have matzah. That's not true, because they were told to make matzah before that.
Right.
But from the first day to the seventh day, that's the times that you're to eat matzot, and anyone who eats chametz within those 2 periods of time, from the first day to the last day, shall be cut off from Israel.
And I would just like to point out that so we have again, which is very common in biblical Hebrew, where a modifying clause is separated from the clause it modifies by intermediate clauses. So you could, where it says miyom rishon ad yom hashvi'i at the end of the verse, from the first day to the seventh day, the closest clause for that is that nichrata nefesh hahi meIsrael, that the person's soul shall be cut off from Israel. And if you were read that as a modern English sentence, it would sound like the person's soul shall be cut off from Israel for 7 days, from the first day to the seventh day. But that's not what it's saying. The clause Yom Rishon ad Yom Hashvi'i, from the first day to the seventh day, is not modifying the clause that's adjacent to it. It's modifying. You could say it's even modifying the first clause, which is Shivat Yamim Matzot Tochelu. And then you can cut out everything else, basically, before you get to the clause that modifies it. So if we were to cut out all the intermediate clauses, it might say something like, Shivat Yamim Matzot Tochelu Meyom Harishon Ad Yom Hashvi'i. So 7 days you shall eat matzot, from the first day until the seventh day. You could also argue that's also modifying Kol Ochel Chametz, that anyone who eats chametz from the first day to the seventh day, then they're cut off from Israel. That may be actually a better interpretation. But the point is that many misinterpretations of the Torah, both by those who don't know biblical Hebrew, including the rabbis, have been done by not realizing that clauses in biblical Hebrew don't always modify the adjacent clause. There can be some intermediate verbiage between the modified clause and the modifying clause, if that makes any sense.
Makes plenty of sense. And interesting, this is how, when you look at the...
To you it does. No, I hope I explained it well.
Yeah, that's when you look at, when we have the text of the Masoretic text, okay, that has the Talmud Hamikra there. That's what's so important about knowing the Talmud Hamikra, because they're not only so that when you go to the disco, you don't have to keep time with reading the Torah. It actually helps you identify the clauses, which clauses are dependent clauses, independent clauses, modifying clauses, noun phrases, verb phrases. It identifies all that for you. And so once you learn how all that works, then you'll have no trouble understanding the text, at least how the Masoretes understood it, who codified it.
Mm-hmm.
Verse 16. Should I take that?
Okay. I'll do it. It's fine. By the way, I'll just read. I will pass over you. This is again Robert Alter, who I always refer to. Primary meaning of the Hebrew verse pasach is to skip, hop, or step over. There's one occurrence in the biblical corpus where it might mean defend, which is scant basis for the claim of some scholars that this is what it is meant here. Passover is used in this translation to preserve the pun on the time-honored English name for the festival. It is quite possible that the Hebrew Pesach was the independent name for this particular lamb sacrifice and for a spring festival, and that the narrative links that name with the Exodus story for folk etymology. Okay, whatever. That's his particular point of view. And let's just see what else I would like to add here. Anything? Oh, shoot, I lost the page. All right, go ahead, Yaakov. You can take the next one.
Okay, verse 16. Uvayom harishon mikra kodesh. Uvayom hashvi'i mikra kodesh. Yihye lachem. Kul melacha lo ya'aseh bahem. Ach asher ya'achel lechol nefesh hu levado ya'aseh lachem. And on the first day is a mikra kodesh, which you can say is a sacred assembly or a sacred reading, depending on how you want to look at the word mikra. And on the seventh day is also a mikra kodesh. It shall be for you. Any melaka which should be done. This is kul melacha lo yasib. No melaka should be done in them. However, that which each person shall eat, that alone shall be done for you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where some people say, Ye'aseh lachem, which shall be done for you, means you should have someone else doing them for you.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you have 2 days: the first day and the seventh day. They shall be sacred time. I think we see on Sukkoth, we have a similar 7-day period, but then on the 8th day, which talk about the 8th day being the day after the 7th day, not necessarily the 8th day of the month, but the 8th day in the 7 days, because you understand you start the Sukkoth on the 15th, and you can't say and on the 8th day because this is afterwards. Anyways, the point is you have what's called the Atzara, which is a gathering, and it's called the Shemone Atzara or something like that. The gathering of the 8th day. And so these days are sacred time. Yep.
We don't have that in Passover. In Passover, you only have 7 days.
Well, you actually have 8 days. You have Pesach included, but you only have 7 days of Matzot.
Okay, if you include, but Pesach is only between the bringing of that sacrifice is only Beina Arba'im, meaning it's from when the sun sets until the total darkness on the 14th. It's basically right before the beginning of the 15th. So Hagamatzot, I should say, is really 8 days. Is really 7 days. There's no analogy to an Atzeret in Hagamatzot that we have in Sukkot. In Sukkot, the 7th day is not a Mikra Kodesh. It's not a holy convocation. There's no prohibition of Milacha on the 7th day of Sukkot. That's transferred to the 8th day to Shmini Atzeret, to the Atzeret that occurs afterwards. And Atzeret comes from the verb la'atzor or atzar, and the way I always interpret it is it's an Atzeret is like one last day to stay with God. It's like a holding back before you go back to your regular daily life, because it's basically the Shmini Atzeret is the last holiday of the entire biblical cycle, right? Then you wait 6 months until the next one. So
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to find where it talks about that. I think it's in Leviticus 23 where they actually talk about that. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the 15th day. From the 15th day of the 7th month is a Hag Sukkot, 7 days. ביום הראשון מקרא קודש, כל מלאכה עבודה לא תעשה, 7 ימים תקריבו אישה. ביום השמיני, there it goes. Here's what Melech's talking about. On the 8th day is a Mikra Kodesh. Okay, and that's the Atzeret Hi, Kul Melacha Avodah Lo Ta'asu. So that's the 8th day. So that's the differences.
Right.
That was in Leviticus 23. I just closed it. I didn't say the verse number, but it's in chapter 23. If you read through chapter 23, which is good for you to read through, then you'll find it. Okay.
Yeah.
So
23. That 20.
17.
Chapter 23 is the statement of all the. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So verse 17. Ushimartem et hamatzo ki be'atzem hayom hazeh hotzeisi et sivotechem me'eretz Mitzrayim ushimartem et hayom hazeh livorotechem chukkat olam. And you shall keep or preserve or guard the matzot, not literally the matzah themselves, but the days of matzot, because in this self-same day, B'etzem hayom hazayin, the self-same day, I brought out your literally it's your armies from the land of Egypt, but this is your hosts from the land of Egypt, and so you shall keep, you shall preserve, you shall guard this day throughout your generations as an eternal ordinance. Verse 18. Barishon ba'arba'a after yom lechodesh ba'erev tochelu matzot ad yom ha'ihad wa'isrim lechodesh ba'arev. In the first, or on the first, which is talking about the first month, in the 14th day of the month at evening, ba'erev, okay? Tochelu matzot, you shall eat matzah, okay? Until the 21st day of the month in the evening. So you shall eat it from evening of the 14th until the evening of the 21st. And in total, that's 7 days.
And by the way, maybe this would be a good time to. Oops. Can you hear me okay now, or still not?
No, I hear you fine now.
Okay. So I was going to say maybe this would be a good time to point out that we are going to have a World Alliance of Qara'im Passover Seder online. Yeah. And the entrance fee is only it's going to be $199 per person. No, it's a joke.
Don't say that, man.
We're not the KJU. Don't worry, it's free. Yeah.
No,
I know.
I'll
and what I was going to say is
the Siddur that we'll use online.
Yeah. Yeah, the Haggadah.
Yep.
So tell your friends, and if you don't have any friends, make some and tell them.
Yeah, if you don't have friends, tell your enemies.
Tell your enemies. Tell your enemies. But everyone's welcome.
Shilech et ami. Let my people go. Okay, so verse 19.
Yeah.
Shiva'at yamim se'or. Lo yimaseh bevatechem. בבתיכם. כי כל אוכל מחמסת ונקרתה הנפש ההיא מעדת ישראל בגר ובאזרח הארץ. Now, I'm going to translate it. I have a comment.
There's a lot to say about this verse. Yeah, go ahead, Yaakov.
Yeah. 7 days. 7 days. Shivat Yamim, 7 days. Seor. This is this yeast. This is the whatever it is that you use to make your chametz bread. Okay, shall not be found in your homes, because everyone that eats mahmeset. Now, mahmeset is something that causes bread to be chametz, which is fermented or whatever. Then that person shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel. Now that's from a ger, someone who resides, even the Ezra Ha'aretz, one who is native born in the land. Now, first, we're going to talk about Seor. The only thing that even mentioned in the Tanakh about the story of Pesach was that they weren't allowed to eat bread. They had to eat matzot, the bread that was not chametz. That's it. Didn't say anything about any other food or drink that you weren't allowed to eat. And also, one thing that has been used in argument against it, talking about wine and some other things, is because normally you don't use what's called chametz with the sacrifices. However, we see that on you had daily sacrifices which were offered every day. It talks about using strong drink and wine, which has already been fermented.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah, and so how can
the
you
libation offering?
That's right. How can it be that you can't use wine when it tells you use wine in strong drink, which has already been fermented? It's something you can get drunk from. That's why it's there. So that's even
in other words, what Yaakov is saying, just to clarify, what Yaakov is saying is, it says that you shall not bring my sacrifice. I think it says al chametz or something like that. There should be no leavened bread brought with the sacrifices. And in fact, whenever you see the grain offerings that are brought with the sacrifice, it's always unleavened cakes. It's always matzot, or it's whatchamacall? It's flour that's been mixed with olive oil, but it's never chametz. However, the Egyptian Karaites claim that chametz includes any, or that machmetz perhaps includes any fermented item. That would include yogurt, cheese, wine. And so what Yaakov is saying is, if that were the case, you wouldn't be able to bring wine with any of the offerings to the temple. It explicitly states the libation offerings that are brought with some of the sacrifices, which are to include wine, which is fermented. So that's a load of baloney. I would just like to point out, there's a lot to say about these verses, but if I could point out a couple of things. Shivat yamim or lo yimatzeh bevatechem. See, I always interpret or chametz and machmetz, even though Sa'or and Chametz mean two different things, that basically it's speaking about essentially the same thing. But if we want to go more literal, we could say that the sourdough starter, the yeast, should not be seen anywhere in your house. Now, if you understand the way bread is made, if there are any people who are bread makers out there, you know that basically you save the starter. You take a little piece of the dough once you've fermented it, and you save it. Then that becomes the next starter for the next. Once it's that becomes the starter dough for the next bread. And I know in some families they have basically starter that's been passed down in that way from generation to generation. Right, great grandmother started this starter dough, and obviously it's changed over time chemically. but it's a direct connection. So where it says or lo yimatzeh, which literally means shall not be found or shall not be seen, it may mean that you can hold on to the starter dough, just pack it away somewhere, just to make sure that it's not seen, and you can wait till after the Passover so you can continue using that starter dough to make more bread. It just should not be visible during Passover. Possible, or it just may mean none of it. Get rid of it all, the whole thing. Goodbye. The other thing I want to point out is that machmetzet and chametz are exactly the same thing. They're synonyms. The Torah does this often, where it'll use slightly different forms of a word to basically signify the same thing. And so there's no difference whatsoever between chametz and machmetzet, in my opinion. I think Yaakov, you said it's the thing that causes the dough to rise. I don't agree with that interpretation. It's saor is what causes the dough to rise. Machmetzet is the same thing as chametz, which is risen dough. Now, if I remember correctly, the Egyptians say not that chametz. They may also say that chametz means all fermented things, but definitely they say that machmetzet means the other fermented things, and that's where they get this ridiculous prohibition against not drinking wine and not eating cheese and yogurt and all this kind of stuff on the seventh day. Okay, and the other thing I want to say is that we have Adat Yisrael. Beger ube'ezrach haaretz. Okay, so this includes the ger and the ezrach. The ezrach is the native born. I'll just read very quickly Robert Alter's interpretation of that word because I think it's important. Where'd it go? Sojourner. As also the Hebrew ger. Okay, native of the land. The Hebrew reflected in native. Ezrach probably refers to a plant. Many think a grapevine, and so would be a metaphor for the touch bonus. He likes to use fancy words. I think that means for the native or the what does it mean? Bulk. Original character of the native springing from the soil in purity. I don't know what the hell that word means. At any rate, so the point is the ger is someone who's not springing from the earth, right? The earth, the land of Israel, so to speak, and whereas the ezrach is. So again, we see someone who, and some people have interpreted that to mean basically if you were born in the land of Israel, you're an ezrach, and if you weren't, you're a ger. And I hold that open to a possible interpretation, which would mean that gerim, the status of a ger is someone who, it's possible, someone who is new to Israel, and already there are children who are born in the land of Israel or were born among the people of Israel already. It's possible, but I don't think so. The way I've always interpreted it, and I may prove to be completely wrong in the end, is that the ezrach is someone who can trace his patrilineal lineage back to Yaakov, whereas the ger is someone who cannot, is basically someone who along their patrilineal line converted. However, the point is that whether you're a ger or an ezrach, you're required to bring you're required to not eat chametz during those 7 days. And also, if you're a ger, then you can also, as we'll see later on in this chapter, you can also bring the Passover sacrifice as long as you're circumcised. But I think the implication of a ger is that he's already circumcised. So, anyway, those are a couple of things that I wanted to say there. And let's see if there's anything else I want to say. No, that's it. Anything you'd like to add, Yaakov?
Yeah, the idea of this cutting off, we have to understand that when it talks about whether it's a ger who's basically a resident amongst the Israelites, the ger has to be, first of all, circumcised in order to take part in any ritual celebration.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because the uncircumcised aren't allowed to partake or eat from the sacrifices or anything. All right, and it tells you that any ger who wants to do the Pesach, he has to be circumcised and come near to bring it. All right, so this cutting off from the Adat Israel, whether it's a ger or an Israelite or a native-born Israelite, doesn't necessarily mean that they are sent away from the land or from the community. They're not exiled, for instance. They're separated from this ritual part. Now, when we look at circumcision, according to the Torah, the person who's not circumcised on the 8th day is supposed to be what? Cut off from his people because he has violated my covenants, what it says. The Israelites that were born after the Exodus in the wilderness, they weren't circumcised. For 40 years, they weren't circumcised. Which means for 40 years,
That's right.
these people were cut off from the Adat Yisrael that was actually able, that was circumcised and able to do it. Now, as these people died, in fact, almost all of them died in the wilderness. It says, except Caleb and Joshua, and those who, I think they were 21 and younger, who were allowed to live. So those who were at least, or at the most, 21 or younger when they came out of Egypt, they were circumcised, and they're the ones who kept these things going for the 40 years. Those that were born in the wilderness were not. But they weren't cast out of the camp. They weren't exiled or even killed, which is what some people say that be cut off means. They were just cut off from the Adat Israel that was taking part in the ritual ceremonies. Because once they were circumcised, they were able to keep Passover for the first time in the land. Okay, so I just want to point that out. So verse 20, كل محماسة לא תאכלו, בכל מושבותיכם תאכלו מצות. All mahmeset, this is the thing that has been made chametz, you shall not eat. In any of your homes, in all of your homes, you shall eat matzot. Now we're on the 5th aliyah, finally. Verse 21. ويقرأ موسى لكل زبون إسرائيل ويومر عليهم مشخوا وقفوا لكم صون لمشبخوتكم وشحتوا الباسة. Okay, I'm going to translate this real quick and then I have a question. And so Moses called for the elders of Israel, and he says to them, draw out and take for yourselves a sown, which is flocks, literally, for your families, and sacrifice or slaughter the Pesach. The question we have is from Yoshi Ben, who's watching on YouTube. So what if our persons who was not a native, but his mom had him circumcised at birth? Would that male have to be recircumcised again before partaking? No. If you're circumcised, you're circumcised. You know, there's no such thing as the hatafat dam, which is what the rabbis call for, which is basically the drop of blood. Which is why when you're a male that's already been circumcised and you go through an Orthodox conversion, you gotta prick it or whatever, however they do that. I'm not sure if they do the Masisat Hadam at that time or not. Maybe that's only for infants. But I would be curious to know anyone who's done the Orthodox conversion.
I'm sure some rabbis do it.
I want to know, did the rabbi suck your penis after the circumcision, which is required according to law? Okay.
Anyway,
but the Torah doesn't demand that. Either one. The Torah doesn't demand the sucking of the penis nor of the pricking of the man. As long as you're circumcised, you're circumcised.
There's only so much you can cut off, before it becomes a problem. But I'm not. In all fairness, I'm not against this ritual of tipatam or hatafatam, as you called it. I mean, it is nice to have some kind of ceremonial circumcision to mark a conversion. But and that's, by the way, take a pin and they prick the penis and draw a little blood from it to kind of symbolically represent the circumcision if you've already been circumcised. But obviously, it's not that the Torah requires it. The Torah just requires that you be circumcised. So,
right. Now, what I had the question. I posted about that a while back on Facebook. I don't know if anybody actually saw it. See, I don't know if anybody reads my posts or not.
right.
Sometimes I feel like I'm just posting for nothing. But I wrote about the
Right.
what's called the Masisat Dam, which literally means the drawing out of blood. Now,
Right. The sucking of blood.
The idea was that blood is the sign of the covenant, but that's not true. Nowhere does it say that blood is the sign of the covenant. It says that the sign of the covenant would actually be in your flesh, and that's the circumcision itself.
That's right.
And that's the sign of the covenant. Now, it didn't say anywhere in those commands that you gotta milk anything or suck anything or do anything to make blood flow. It just says circumcise. Period. That's all it says.
Right.
Now, as long as you fulfill that, then it's okay. Now, there's different ways to understand the form of circumcision. The way I understand it is that the entire foreskin is removed and not just a piece of it. And definitely not splitting it. I think it's what they call the bria. But anyway. So where are we now? Verse 22. ولتحتم أجودة عيد صوم وتفلتم بدام أشر بصع وهجعتم إل حمشكوه وإل شتي حمجزور من هدام أشر بصع وأتم لو تيسؤوا إيش مفتح بيثو عاد بوكر. And so you shall take a bunch of azov. Agudat means something that has been bunched together or bound together. It doesn't mean a dome in the sky, which is what a very famous Karaite rabbi has been preaching for a few years. And you shall dip it in the blood that's in the bowl. Now, there's no mention of this earlier. I want to point that out. It doesn't say you catch the blood in the bowl. Saf is a bowl, or it could even be a pan, I think. Saf is a pan. But it doesn't tell you that when you sacrifice the Pesach that you catch anything. But here we have, evidently, you take the blood, you put it in the Saf, and then you take this bunch of Eitzov, which is where we get the word hyssop from, comes from this word Eitzov. And you dip that in the blood. This is where you get your baptism. Because that's what it means. You immerse it in the blood that's in the bowl. And then it says, Hegatim, which literally means you strike it on the towards the meshkov, and the two mezuzot.
You touch it to the lintel and to the I don't know, to the upper part and the side parts.
The meshkov, I think it's called a lintel. But anyway, and then to the two doorposts themselves. That's where the mezuzah is actually a doorpost. It's not a magic amulet that you hang on there. And you shall not go out. That's not any person from the door or from the opening of his house until morning. Okay.
It's interesting that the word saf is used in that verse in two completely different contexts. So saf there is usually interpreted, as you said, interpreted as a basin or as like a bowl. Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's not. My mistake. Temlotitsu Ishme
I'll say
Oh,
I missed that one.
because Saf also means a threshold. No. I thought it was referring to.
Melech, we lost you.
Am I back?
Yep, now you're back.
Saf also means a threshold, and I think that in certain places, I know in certain places it's used to mean a threshold, like the entrance, the point of entrance between the inside and the outside of a house. So I thought it was being used there. Forget it. It's not.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Who is this? Is this Justin?
Yeah.
How old are you, Justin?
Great.
3. All
Yeah.
right, well, welcome to the program. Okay, so verse 23. وعبر أدوناي لنجوف את מצרים ورأى את אדם אשר את אדם על המשקוף ועל שתי המזוזות ופסח אדוני על הפתח ולא ייתן המשחית לבוא אל בתיכם לנגוף. And Adonai shall pass through to strike the Egyptians, and he shall see the blood that's on the mashkos, the lintel, and upon the 2 doorposts, and he shall hop over the petha, which means he'll pass by or he'll hop over or go by the opening or the door, the petha, and he won't allow the mashchit, which is the destroyer, to enter into your homes to strike. Then you go, which means to plague.
It's very interesting language here. So it says Yehovah is going to pass through Egypt, and he's not going to allow the mashchit to enter into the house. So it's almost like Yehovah is coming down with the mashchit. The mashchit is kind of like doing the dirty work on planet Earth, but Yehovah is somehow traveling around with him, or is with him as he's doing the dirty work, and he's basically saying, "Okay, that's an Egyptian house. Go in and take care of business. That's an Israelite house. There's blood on the doorposts and on the lintel. So the lintel. So don't go in and take care of it." But it's very interesting. Again, because we've spoken so many times about this relationship between God and the angel, or when the word Yehovah is used interchangeably with the angel. And here it almost seems like Yehovah and the angel are going down together, but the angel's actually taking care of business in the physical world, but Yehovah is somehow with him. I don't know. It's all very strange and mysterious to me.
So, yeah, I like I said, the way I make sense of it is that when it talks about God doing anything or coming or going or moving or having any anthropomorphic references, my opinion is talking about the Malach Adonai. And then when you look at it that way, it makes perfect sense. But that's up to you. Verse 24. Ushmartem et hadavar hazeh.
I'm sorry, Yaakov. I was off the headphones for 1 second. I didn't hear what you said. So how do you say that again? How you understand it then?
No, I'm just saying that the way I put all this together is that it's the Malach Adonai, and that any time that you see like these anthropomorphic themes in the Tanakh, that this is speaking about this angel. We see, for instance, there he is. There's Justin. Maybe he really is 3. How you doing, Justin?
Oh my God, he's a kid. Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, Justin. Where are you from?
Whipping Oregon.
From where?
Whipping Oregon.
Oh, wow. Well, stay safe there. It's a little bit crazy over there. And how did you find out about the World Alliance of Qara'im?
I do not remember.
Okay. All right.
Good.
And how old are you, Justin?
12.
Oh
12.
boy, wow.
I thought he said
The next
36.
generation. Well, welcome. And are you you define yourself as a Karaite or
I'm a
you're just
student.
interested? Okay, I hope so. At the age of 12, you're supposed to be a student by law. But you're interested in the Bible or?
No, not at all.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Well, welcome anyway. All right.
We got another delay here, the last Melech.
Justin?
Yep. Now you're back.
Oh, now I'm back. Justin, do you speak Hebrew or no Hebrew?
No.
So you have no connection whatsoever to the Bible, to Karaism, or to Hebrew. You just kind of randomly found us and you're joining us.
Yeah.
Okay, well, welcome. maybe we could teach you something.
Thank you, guys.
You're
very
welcome. You're welcome.
I'm
Yeah.
glad. I'm glad. I'm glad.
Yeah, I don't know how the heck you found us, but welcome anytime. At any rate, okay, so do you know what we're studying here, by the way, Justin?
Yeah.
What?
I forgot.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right, well, let's go on. So, what was I going to say? Yeah, so then Yaakov, so how do you interpret this? Avar Yehovah lidgof et Mitzrayim, okay? Yehovah passed through to strike Egypt, okay? V'lo yiten hamashchit lavo. So you have here where in V'lo yiten hamashchit lavo, you have Yehovah as the subject and the mashchit as the object. So there's an interaction here between Yehovah and so it can't be that Yehovah, where it says V'avar Yehovah lidgof et Mitzrayim, that the word Yehovah there couldn't represent the angel because he's the one saying you cannot let that he doesn't let the angel in.
Right. When we look at it, for instance, at the very beginning of Shemot, it talks about Moses encountering the burning bush. And it says the Malach Adonai appeared to him in the flame of fire. Then it says that Adonai called out to him from the midst of this bush.
Yes, but that's different. That's different. Because there you have Yehovah and the angel being used interchangeably, which I agree with you on that one. But here, this is now Yehovah being used as the subject and Hamashchit being used as the object. So there's interaction between two entities here, both of which are Yehovah, both of which are angelic or divine.
The next thing we see is in the pillar of cloud and fire. It says that it was the pillar that moved from one side of the camp to the other. And then it says that the angel of God moves from one side to the other. And then later on it says that Adonai looked out. It says, and it uses the word mashkif, which is interesting because it's
that's fine, but that's still different. That's still different. Here you have Yehovah lo yitain hamashchit lavo. All right, go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you. Bad
twice.
Bad
It's okay.
Okay.
No, but
Twice.
The point is, then we see later on. He says, "Look,
right.
My presence, my panai will go before you.
Yep.
My angel shall go before you." And whenever we see this, whatever was in this column of fire, it says that was the Kabod Adonai that appeared. They saw it on the mountain. Now we see an interesting interchange between Moses and God. He says, "Look, show me your Kabod." All right, and he tells him, "You can't see it because no man can see me and live."
Right.
So what is it Moses is actually asking to see? It can't be the same thing that everybody saw, because way back in chapter 16 of Shemot, at that time when the Israelites were begging for bread and they get the manna for the first time, it says this kavod appeared at the edge of the camp and all Israel saw it. Whenever they finally got to Sinai, it says that the Chavod Adonai came down upon Sinai in a column of fire and smoke. This is the same thing that anytime Moses went to the tent of meeting, it says that God appeared. It was this column that came down and he spoke with him there. So that's what I'm getting at. The only way I can reconcile all of that together is that it's interchangeable. When God says he's going to do something, it's not actually him on the physical realm. What we consider his reality of who he is that Moses asked to see and can't see while he's alive in this physical realm. And so this Kavod Adonai, which is the Melech Adonai, in my opinion, is the physical representation of God in this physical reality that we call the universe. And so when it talks about God passing through, we know it wasn't God that actually passed through. It was actually this Mashiach who was the angel of God.
Fine, but you completely avoided my question here.
No, I didn't.
And I agree with everything you said. But there's a problem here because it says, Avar Yehovah Lingof et Mitzrayim, Velo Yiten HaMashchit Lavo. So, Velo Yiten, who's the, where it says, Velo Yiten HaMashchit Lavo, the subject is Yehovah, and the object is Mashchit, unless you want to say, well, it doesn't have...
I have a
no
question.
S. Yes, Justin.
Wonderful.
I want to say thank you guys for being nice to me.
Oh, you're welcome. Welcome anytime.
Yeah, so I gotta go.
Okay.
You have to go? Okay. Well, you have a nice day, Justin.
Bye. Thank you.
Hopefully
Bye-bye.
you
Take care. You're
Hopefully
welcome.
you can come next week. That was pretty cool. No, the point is
Random visitors from cyberspace.
I don't think that God himself was in the column of fire. I don't think that God himself was
Forget the column of fire. Forget all that. Forget all that. No, let's relate to this verse. Velo iten hamashchit lavo. God is the subject. Hamashchit is the object. Unless you want to say there's no et between lo yiten et hamashchit lavo, but I still think we know sometimes the et is not used even if it's the object, right? So it says that Yehovah passed through Egypt and he did not let the mashchit come. So there's Yehovah and the mashchit. Yehovah, it's not that they're being used interchangeably. There's a subject and an object here. Yehovah is the subject and the mashchit is the object. So how would you explain that? I'll tell you my explanation afterwards.
Okay, then tell me yours. I already told you mine.
No, but you haven't told me your interpretation of this particular verse, which is different from what you're saying.
It talks about every time. I don't care what it is. This is what I'm telling you. Anytime it says that God appeared to somebody, okay, it's not God himself. It's this angel that appeared to him. Anytime it
Then there are
says
two
that
angels
God
here. Then there are two angels.
No, it's just one.
Then who's the subject? Where it says "Velo yiten hamashchit lavo," who's the subject and who's the object of that phrase?
It's talking about the angel himself. Okay, this is God.
So who's the subject?
The subject.
No, God's not speaking to Moses here. Verse 23, I'm talking about.
Yeah.
God's not speaking to Moses here at all. Moses isn't involved here at all.
It says the same thing back in verse 12. وَأَذَارْتِي بِأَرِسْ مِصْرَيْمِ بَلَيْلَ هَذَيْ وَحِكَيْثِي كُلْ بِخُورْ بِأَرِسْ مِصْرَيْمِ. And we know that God didn't himself personally strike. It was this mashchit, which is what it says.
Fine.
Okay.
But that's not a contradiction. That's not a contradiction. Because we're here, that's two different phrases. There's no object and there's no object. But in verse 23, there's an object and a subject. V'lo yiten hamashchit lavo. God did not allow, Yehovah did not allow the mashchit to come. So who's the God that's being spoken about? The mashchit did not allow the mashchit to go. He didn't allow himself to go. Or there's a second angel. Or is God himself coming down with the angel? You see what I'm saying?
Okay, so we're going to look at this too, because like I said, it says he's passing through, but God himself isn't physically passing through. It's this angel who's passing through the land. Okay? It says, وَأَذَارْتِي بِأَرِسْ مِصْرَيْمِ بَلَيْلَ هَذَيْ وَحِكَيْثِي كُلْ بِخُورْ. We know who
I
actually
understand that.
it's the mashkit. It tells you in the next verse.
That's clear. That's clear. That's clear because it says "V'lo yitein hamashchit lavo" in verse 23. But who's the avarti? Because the whoever is the person that is the entity that is avar Yehovah l'gofet Mitzrayim is either
Okay.
allowing the mashchit to come into the house or restraining the mashchit. So there's two entities being spoken about here.
It's just like when we speak to Moses. When God speaks to Moses, he says, "You brought up Israel out of Egypt." But then he says, "I brought up Israel out of Egypt." He says,
But that doesn't work here. Because here there's
absolutely works. There's two different people. Who actually brought Israel out of Egypt? And then we actually have another.
yes, but there it's not one speaking to the other. But there it's not one speaking to the other. Here one's speaking to the other, or one's interacting with the other. One is an subject and one is an object.
Yeah, this is God who's actually working through Moses. And then we see actually in another place where Moses even tells you he sent an angel to bring this up out of Egypt. Now you have three different people that he's referring to.
Yes, but they're not. But they're not acting. They're not interacting in the same phrase.
They're acting at the exact same time, because when Moses brought Israel
It's
out
not
of
the same.
Egypt, it's the angel who guided them, and that's how God brought them up. It is absolutely the same. In my
Still
opinion.
not the same.
If you disagree, there's
all right. Well, anyway, all right. We're gonna get bogged down. So I'll just give my opinion, and then we can move on. I think that what might be happening here is because we have plenty of places where God comes down to see. Okay, in the case of Sodom, in the case of we just read last week, in the case of the Israelites, to see their pain. I think where it says Avad Yehovah Gofet Mitzrayim, that it is somehow, whatever that means, actually Yehovah himself going down to see, to look at, but then he's not actually taking any physical action within the world. When it comes time to the physical action, he's basically running. I have to quote Joe Biden running popcorn. So I'm sorry, popcorn running a bunch of bad boys, corn pop or whatever the hell his name was. Basically, Lahavdil, Yehovah is running this mashchit. So Yehovah is going down himself. He himself is going down, and then he's saying, "Okay, mashchit, go in there and take care of business. Mashchit, go in there and take care of business. Mashchit, go in there and take care of business." See, the only way I can interpret that, where it says "V'lo yitein mashchit," is the subject is Yehovah himself, and the mashchit is the object. And we also do see places where Yehovah came down to see the earth. In the case of Noah, in the case of Sodom and Gomorrah, in the case of the Israelites, it doesn't say anything about sending down an angel. The angel may have taken care of business on planet Earth. He may have done the speaking and the acting, but the seeing is possibly, this kind of speculation, but maybe the seeing and the hearing, what was it, the Na'akat Israel, that the cries of Israel came up to Yoah. Maybe he can do the seeing and the hearing, but he doesn't take any direct physical action within the world, within the physical world.
When you look at, I think it's Zechariah, they talk about the angels of God being the eyes of God, and they run to him for on the earth. I think I might be mistaken, but I think it's talking about the 7 eyes of God. And run to him for that. I think Zechariah. But we even see a part of this when in the book of Job, where it talks about the day that the sons of God come before God himself, I guess, to give a report of what's going on in the physical realm. I don't know. We know that when it talked about Abraham, he was sitting at the door of his tent one day, looked up and he saw 3 men. One of those men was identified as God. It says that other 9 remained while the other 2 went towards Sodom and Gomorrah. And then he spoke with Abraham. So what we have to understand is that actually God himself? Did God himself physically appear to Abraham? And I believe that's a no. I believe it's the same angel of God who speaks and acts on behalf of God in the physical
having a bit of
talking
trouble
to
hearing you,
Tom.
but I think I'm having a lot of trouble hearing you. I don't know if it's on my side or on your side.
Is probably a combination of both.
Could very well be. The internet here stinks.
Is that
Anyway.
better?
Yeah, much better now.
I think what it is instead of going through my Bluetooth on where are we at? StreamYard, I think it
Right.
goes through my microphone on my computer because every time I lay it my Tanakh down, nobody can hear me. But anyway, the point is that when we look at the story of Abraham, when he saw these three men, we know two are identified as angels because in the next chapter it talks about these two men who went to Sodom and Gomorrah were two angels. It says they were two messengers that showed up. Now, they the one remained with Abraham, and he's called Adonai. It says that Adonai remained speaking with Abraham. He was walking around, had lunch with him, had the milk and meat, which is actually forbidden. He should be stoned, separated from the rabbinic community. But the point is either you believe that is the actual physical God himself appeared to Abraham, or he's actually an angel as well. This is one of the angels of God who remained and spoke with Abraham, who's actually called Adonai at the point. Now he's speaking to Abraham, but it's not that the angel is speaking of his own will or whatever. He's speaking for God himself, and in that capacity, that's why he's called Adonai there. And I think this is the same thing, because we see it throughout the Tanakh that it's an angel, and then it's Adonai. It's an angel in the column of fire, but then it's Adonai in the column of fire. It's Moses speaking to this form, which is called the Temudat Adonai, when he speaks to Aaron and Miriam and Moses. He says, look, if there's a prophet that arises amongst Israel, I will make myself known to him in a dream or a vision, but not with Moses. He speaks to me face to face, okay? And he will see the Temudat Adonai. This is what he'll see. So what is the Temudat Adonai? I believe that the Temudat Adonai is actually the Melech Adonai that Moses spoke with at the burning bush, that guided him when he went up to the mountain and spoke with Adonai. It was in the same column that came down, and it was the same angel. And that's just my opinion.
All right, let's move on. Any rate, Yaakov, another 10 minutes or so, or another, or so, then I'm going to get going because it's already pretty late. We've been going at 3 hours and 15 minutes. So I don't know how much longer you want to go, but I gotta get going soon.
Yeah, I've been here the entire 3 hours and 18 minutes.
You have. I can't do it that long.
No.
All right, so we're in.
We'll read until the end of this aliyah, and then I'll call it quits. This will be the end of the first aliyah. And so we're on 24. ושמרתם את הדבר הזה לחוק לך ולבניך עד עולם. And you shall guard this thing as an ordinance for you and for your children forever. And the ordinance here is talking about the actual Pesach service and the days of unleavened bread.
Right.
25.
Well, let me just say one thing here. So that kind of, again, is a summary sentence. That's an ending summary. So it starts really in verse 14, and now that ends pretty much here in verse 24. So those are all the laws for the original Passover right there, from 14 through 24, through the end of 24. And now we have in verse 25 what you do in the future. Hello?
Yeah. Okay. So
I'll read it, I guess. Verse 25. So it shall be when you go into the land which which Yehovah shall give to you, kasher diber, as he has spoken. You shall keep this service, this ritual. והיה כי יאמרו אליכם בניכם מה העבודה הזאת לכם, and if your children, your sons shall say to you, what is this service to you? ואמרתם זבח פסח הוא ליהוה אשר פסח על בתי בני ישראל במצרים. So you shall and you shall say, this is the Passover sacrifice to Yehovah, who skipped over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, when he struck Egypt, but he protected, he saved our houses, and the nation and the nation bowed down and prostrated. So in the future, it's talking about bringing the Passover sacrifice, is what it's saying here, right? We have all the laws for what you do in the, one second. One second. Wait, where's it starting? I'm sorry. One second. I'm sorry. No, it starts in 14 already, speaking about what will be in the future. My mistake. Before that is the rules for the first Passover. I said that incorrectly. One second. That is over the. I guess it skips kind of back and forth, but basically it's it's summing up here about what should be done in the first Passover, and now speaking about the rituals in the future. Okay. Anyway, next verse.
The last verse. וילכו ויעשו בני ישראל כאשר ציווה אדוני את משה ואהרון כן עשו. And so the children of Israel, they went and they did as Adonai commanded Moses and Aaron. So they did. And
right.
That is the end of the fifth aliyah, finally.
Oh, can we do the death of the firstborn, please? Can we do the death of the firstborn? I love the death of the firstborn.
Well, yeah, that'll take us to chapter 13. That'll be the rest of this
No, we
chapter.
could just do no, just the next couple of verses.
Oh, next time. Okay. So we're starting the
29.
sixth. The sixth. That's a hard thing to say. Sixth. The sixth aliyah, verse 29. ويهي بحسي حليلة وأدوناي هكا كل بخور بأرث مصرين ببخور بارعو هيوشير على كسو عد بخور حشري أشر ببيت حبور وكل بخور بهيمة. And so it was at midnight, or in the middle of the night, or half of the night, that Adonai struck all the firstborn of the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, the one that was sitting upon his throne, which basically just meant the current Pharaoh that was ruling in the days of Moses, even to the firstborn of the Shevi, which literally means the captive, which was in the prison, Beit Habor, the house of the pit. The pit here is often used. This is cool. I'm glad I read this, man. I'm glad you said read it. Months ago, I don't know when it was, we spoke about resurrection, death, and resurrection. And you see this long theme throughout the Tanakh about going to the pit. And the theme is that Israel died as a nation. They ceased to be a living nation. And they went to exile. Okay? And there, the exile is called being in the pit, or actually see it in several places where it actually talks about being in Sheol. But it talks about when they come back from exile, that they leave the pit and they go back to the land of the living, right? Which basically means they become a living, thriving nation again, because the nation itself is personified. Either it's a living nation or it's a dead nation. Either it's there doing, living and thriving in the land and doing the Torah, or it's dead and it's in the pit, which is talking about being in exile. And this is what you see here in this verse here. The Shavi. Shavi literally means a captive of war, but in this case, it's talking about a prisoner who is actually in the house of the pit, which is the prison. So I just wanted to share that because you see that theme a lot. And while I
Yosef was in the Yosef was that's where Yosef was.
That's the house of Potiphar here, according to the text.
Well, it's very interesting that also maybe a veiled reference back to Yosef, who was in the Beit Tabor, who was in the prison.
He was there. That's right.
And then maybe somehow this is revenge on the fact. Maybe this is mentioned explicitly, to point out maybe revenge is being taken on the fact that Yosef was so many generations ago thrown into prison in Egypt. I wonder.
Well, it's just whoever happened to be in the prison, who was
I know that
Egyptian.
I know that.
Yeah.
No, I understand that, but and the point obviously that it's saying from the highest, right? The Pharaoh from the firstborn of Pharaoh down into the lowest status, even the firstborn of the person who's sitting in the dungeon. But I wonder if it's mentioned, it doesn't say the firstborn of a servant or something like that. This is the firstborn of the person who's in the dungeon, right?
It's Bechor HaShivcha. Asher Yoshev al Harayafim. Hang on. Harayafim, or something like that. I'll give you the verse right here in just a second.
No, but I mean I'm talking about in this verse, but okay.
Verse chapter 10, what is that? Just read that thing. חוזר אני יוצא בתוך מצרים ומת כל בכור בארץ מצרים מבכור פרעה היושב על כיסאו עד בכור השפחה אשר אחר הרייחיים. So that's the shifcha.
Where is this?
This is in chapter 11 verse 5.
Where is that?
Chapter 11 verse 5.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Actually, it starts in verse 4. It says, "V'yomer Moshe, Ko amar Adonai, chahatzot halela, ani yotzei b'toch Mitzrayim, u'met kol bechor be'eretz Mitzrayim, mit bechor Paro hayoshev al kis'o, ad bechor hashevcha."
Yeah, that's all fine and dandy, but that was, and that's interesting. But that wasn't exactly my point. My point was that maybe here it's mentioning specifically the person who's in Beit Tabor as some kind of revenge, or some kind of mention back to Yosef, who's in Beit Tabor, and now that Egypt is finally being, finished off, and it's like a veiled reference back to Joseph. I don't know, just a speculation. At any rate, verse 30. V'yakam Paro, verse 30. Go ahead, I'll do it. V'yakam Paro laila hu. בכל עבדיו, בכל מצרים, ותהי צעקה גדולה במצרים, כי אין בית אשר אין שם מת. And Pharaoh awoke, got up that night, and all the servants and all of Egypt got up that night. And in the middle of the night, the implication is, and there was a great wailing or a great cry, a great scream in Egypt, because there was not any house in which there was not a dead person. That's it.
Yep. And then he called
So
back.
take that, Egypt. That's what happens when you mess with God. When you mess with the true God, Yehovah. You get yours in the end.
And finally, this is an interesting play here. It says, ويقرأ لموسى وأولي أهرون ليلة ويومر قوموا سئوا מתוך عمي גם אתם גם בני ישראל ולכו עבדו את אדוני כדברתם. And so he calls to Moses and Aaron in the night, and he says, stand up or get up and get out from amongst my people. You, as well as the children of Israel, go and serve Adonai as you have spoken. Gam sonechem, gam bekorakem, kihu, kaasher dibartem walehu, verachtem gam oti. Also, your flocks and your herds, take as you have spoken and go. Only bless me. Okay, only bless me. Okay, then it's verse 33. Now, after the entire episode, it says, وَيْحَزِّخْ Adonai et lev Pharaoh et lev Avadah. So Adonai hardened the heart of Pharaoh and
they're going to go chase after the Israelites.
Now we have something else being hardened here. It says, وَتِحِزَّخْ مِصْرَعِيمْ الْحَأَمْ لِمَحِيرْ لِشَلَّحَمْ مِنْ هَآرَةٍ. And so now the same verb that was used to harden the heart of Pharaoh is that the people of Egypt are now seizing, they're grabbing hold to the Israelites, and they're hurriedly trying to get them out. Hey, get out of here.
Wait, which verse is that? Let me see.
Said, that's 33. وَتِحِزَّاقْ مِصْرَيْمْ عَلْهَامْ لِمَهَيْرْ لِشَلَّهَامْ مِنْ هَآرَةٍ كِي أَمِرُوا كُلَّانُ مَيْتِينَ. Because they're saying, we're going to all die.
I love it. I love it when the Torah. Yeah. Yeah, I love when the Torah does those kind of plays on words, and it's so midah keneged midah. It's so karmic, because Pharaoh's heart was hard, and now, just as you said, Yechazak Mitzrayim al-Am. They pressured.
We got a couple questions.
I guess you could translate that as pressure. Yep.
So the first question here is, can you comment on the period of time Israelites were in Egypt, Exodus 12:40, in the context of Genesis 15:13 and the genealogy of Moses, Exodus chapter 6? Yeah, we can comment.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. One more time?
Yeah, it says, can you comment on the period of time Israelites
okay.
Exodus 12:40.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can give your answer, I'll give my answer. You're talking about the contradiction between the 400 years and the 430 years?
Well, yeah, I guess so. It says, Moshav ben Yisrael, Asher Yashivu bi Misraim, Shiroshim Shana, wa Arba'a Me'od Shana.
Right.
Now, and of course, in 15:13, let me see what 15:13 says. So 15:13 says.
It says 400.
Oh, that's Genesis 15:13. Yeah, and then the fourth generation. It says they'll. Now look, it just says that they will serve them for 400 years, and that's true. But it says in the fourth generation they will return. So it doesn't say how long they would actually be there. That they would actually be there for 400 years. Now it does say that it was 430 years, but we have to understand that I think, if I'm not mistaken, that you have to count the time Joseph was also there. He was there for, I think, about 30 years or so before his brothers were, right? Was it 20 or 30 years?
I think it was 17 until Yaakov died. No, he must have been there longer. I'm not sure. But I would give a different interpretation, which is that the way that the Torah works with numbers is that it doesn't always give exact numbers. It gives approximations. So when in Genesis 15:13, when it speaks about you'll serve, this nation for 400 years, that's an approximation. That's a round figure. Here, when it says 430 years, that's a more exact amount. And one could even say that that's an approximation, because isn't it interesting that it's a round number? It's not 432 or 437 or 432 5.5. It's 430. That itself may be a round number. So the Torah doesn't always exactly, when it uses numbers, it doesn't always exactly use. It doesn't use always exact numbers. It can use approximations. I think when it speaks about 600,000 people, right? I don't know if it ever says 600,000 exactly. Maybe I'm just remembering it from my rabbinical days. But when it's counted up, the people that when they did the census in the desert, it came out to not exactly 600,000. It was a little bit more. It was like 601,000 or something like that. So numbers don't always have to be exact in the Torah. They could be approximations. And I think that's what's being spoken about in Genesis 15:13. It's an approximation.
The next comment is on the fact that the Septuagint and Samaritan Pentateuch for Exodus 12:40 reads land of Egypt and the land of Canaan, and we have it here in Samaritan Pentateuch. It says Moshe ben Yisrael wa Abotham. This is the first difference you see. It doesn't have Abotham in the Masoretic text. It says Moshe ben Yisrael wa Abotham, and so the dwelling of the children of Israel and their fathers. Asher Yashiru Eretz Canaan, which they dwelt in the land of Canaan, the Eretz Mitzrayim, and as well as in the land of Egypt. Shiloshim Shana wa Arabat Me'ot Shana was 430 years. So that's the way the Samaritans understood it anyway.
I'm having a lot of trouble hearing you, Yaakov. I'm still having a lot of trouble hearing you.
I said that's the way the Samaritans understood it. I'm not sure what's in the Septuagint. I don't have that in front of me right now. But it's probably the same thing or close to it. I don't know what's in the Qumran scrolls. I'll have to look that up later. But it may be that they say something similar. But that doesn't make any difference. That's just the way the Samaritans understood it, and they explain that verse that way.
Right.
And when you look at the notations of the Samaritans, it's similar to the notations of the Masoretes. The difference is that the Masoretes wrote their notations on the side. The Samaritans wrote their notations.
You're really breaking up. You're really breaking up.
All right, so.
Yeah.
If you guys have any more questions, I'm going to get off here because Shabbat's over. I want to eat.
Yeah.
And my butt's hurting. I've been sitting here for 3 hours, almost 4 hours. If you have any more questions, please write them in the comments, either on Facebook or on YouTube. Send me an email. Doesn't make any difference. I'll do my best to answer them. Or Melech, send him all the emails you can. Bombard him with emails.
Don't worry, I already get bombarded with emails.
Yeah, piles of them. All right, so I'd like to wish everyone Shabbat Shalom who's still in Shabbat, and Shavua Tov for all who are through with Shabbat. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. It's great. It's awesome.
It was a great study, as always. Really was.
All right. So
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
And Shavua Tov.